all day. If you're technical. So it was a very full day. We went from place to place to place.
This is just all new stuff. This is Dave Franzo's email. Yeah, no, they should be on.
It's next week or the week, I'll let you know. Must be the weekend.
Run. Just, Charlie, just poke your head out the door when you're ready. I gotta wait for Charlie to stick his head out the door. Can everyone please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order for February 17th, 2016. Look to the board for the acceptance of the agenda. Seeing no objections, the agenda is accepted. Announcements, the Board of Selectmen meeting is audio and video recorded. Public comment. Do we have anything for public comment tonight that's not on our agenda? Yes, ma'am. Can you please come down the mic and identify yourself?
Hi. You can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm Marjorie Trott, and I have a request to make of the Board of Selectmen. I live on Dukes Road, and all of us received a letter in mid-October about a sewer line that had been put in by a private developer that we were told we now have to hook up to within a 6-month period. And we have a lot of concerns about this, not just me, but we've got a whole lot of residents. We've been really trying to get answers since October and have been having a really tough time with this. We originally thought this was something we should bring before the Board of Health, and then after sitting through your meeting last week, it seemed like maybe you were the more appropriate board for us to talk to, because our concerns seem to cross
No,
three different
actually,
boards.
this is a Board of Health issue. You can go to them for waivers or extensions. We don't have anything to do with that. What we're dealing with in the sewers coming forward is potentially adding districts to the, or zones to the extension of the sewer district. We don't have the ability to grant you waivers or extensions to the hookup. That's the Board of Health.
And if we have a question about the process and the lack of our having any public hearings before this to know that it was even going in, would that be with you or with them?
Board of Health,
Board of Health also?
yeah.
Okay, so thank you. That was something we needed to know. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yeah.
add a little bit to that? We've had a lot of internal discussion about this this week, and I'm advised by my staff that they have answered numerous questions from people on Dukes Road, and that there has been an unfortunate situation where a letter was sent out from a non-town engineer indicating that you didn't have to hook up, when in fact there is a Board of Health requirement to hook up that isn't really a new requirement. So my understanding from my staff is that this has been explained several times, and we are actually in the process of preparing a letter that we are hoping will clarify exactly what the situation is to all of the residents along the road. We talked about the possibility of maybe even scheduling a meeting to answer any questions about it, but any waivers from the sewer connection requirement is strictly a Board of Health matter.
Okay, Libby, we would be so grateful if you would set up a meeting for us all. That would
We'll-
be really wonderful.
We'll work on that. It's not going to be tomorrow, but soon.
In the meantime, is it possible to have a time extension so that we can ask these questions?
that
And-
is something you should take up with the health director.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very, very
Can
much.
can I just mention one thing? I understand the Board of Health part here, but some of the questions raised, I think, are not solely Board of Health issues. And so we need to acknowledge those questions
There
might
are,
have a different forum
yep,
for
there,
resolution and
if-
answers.
if there are questions, for example, about the size of the sewer line
Right.
and the engineering of the sewer line, we're intending to answer all of those in our letter. Again, my understanding from my staff is that the sewer line is sized and engineered appropriately, and that can be certainly explained in detail in the letter.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Catherine?
Catherine Stover, 5 Liberty Street. There's a great number of us who, and I emphasize this is our impression, that get the impression that the Island Home project at Sherburne Commons is barreling along and is steamrolling at full speed. And we were wondering, has a site evaluation been done on that site? Has a site evaluation been done at the current site? What other places, we've heard a rumor that other places are also being considered.
I
We'd
think
like
the
to
key
know.
word here, Catherine, is rumored.
Okay,
Okay, so let me stop you here, because we're not going to get into a big debate of where the island home's going. We've hired a consultant to look at all
We
aspects
understand
and
that.
all locations of the island home. We haven't seen their report yet. They'll get back to us with the report, and then we'll go forward from there. We said at town meeting that we would look at the present site as well as other sites. We are doing that. The rumor mill and the Facebook rumor mill and the Instagram rumor mill is gone hog wild here with a bunch of stuff that is not true. So until we've seen the study from our consultants that says what we can do, where we can do it, we have no plans to do anything. So I just want to put you at ease that we're looking
Okay.
at all open aspects of where it's going to go. Okay?
and how much input will the public have?
Well, first, we got to get the report from the consultants. They've met with everyone, they met with the staff, they met with the Board of Selectmen, they met with the residents and the residents'
Families, yeah.
families. They're taking all that into consideration, and they'll write us a report. They also have to meet with the state to see what we can do as far as this location, that location, and so on.
Okay,
Until we get these answers, it's all hearsay and circumstantial evidence, and I don't want to
Okay.
really get into a debate about what we're going to do until we get this report.
okay, and do we have a timeline for that?
Libby, do we have an idea?
Well, yes, we are hoping that we're just talking about it tonight. We're hoping that the consultants will have a report to present to the board on March 16th. We also talked about having a public forum the next day. We have already had 2 public discussions about this. You might not have been there, but in the
There was
beginning.
one at the Island Home that I attended. Not
See-
one note was taken.
Okay, I'm just trying to explain.
Catherine,
Something.
don't
Okay.
go down that road, please. We're doing the best we can with what we have. We've hired a
Okay.
consultant to look at all aspects of it. If it can stay where it is, it'll stay where it is. If it can't, it'll have to go somewhere else. Or we
Okay.
can just not have a facility at all. I mean, we're doing the best we can.
Okay, so March 16th, did you say, or 17th?
March 16th for a Board of Selectmen presentation and the 17th for a public forum. Those are tentative dates, and they will be public as the other dates were made public.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just so you know, when we, look, I can't speak for everyone else, but when we met with the consultants, I made it clear that, you know, keeping it there if it was possible was first priority. Now, that may, or, you know, may not happen, but that was, you know, I can speak as one selectman that, you know, my conversation with them.
Thank you.
And, you know, I can say I had, you know, some similar concerns as well as far as keeping it there. My concerns are mainly, though, there is some questions with, you know, it's right on the water, you know. I've heard some stories in the past about how that's not necessarily a good idea, and I don't fully understand that, and I think it's a process, and I think all of the board members and the public is aware that there's a lot of nuances going on, and we're gonna get to those. And
Okay.
we will have a public forum to talk more in detail. We're not gonna rush anything through.
Until we get the
we
report,
delayed
I'm not ready
more
to
and-
make any kind of decisions at all.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments for something that's not on our agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. We have no new business tonight. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick question. Chris Whitty, also a Dukes Road resident. Should we be going to the Board of Health meeting tomorrow, or should we wait for a special meeting?
Roberto, is this on the
Because there
agenda
is a health
tomorrow?
department meeting tomorrow.
Okay, it's not on the agenda.
You could
so
go
that's-
tomorrow and request that this be put on a future agenda.
Uh-huh. So do you think that's the best way to go, or?
Yeah, they have a public comment just like we do here.
Mhm.
And I think you don't have to repeat yourselves, but if someone just makes clear that you'd like to be heard about your concerns,
Right,
I'm sure it will go on the next reasonable agenda for the Board of Health.
okay,
And I say that, I sit there as the Board of Selectmen representative on the Board of Health, so.
okay, all right, thanks.
You're welcome, Chris. Okay. Any other public comments for anything on our agenda, that's not on our agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. We have the approval of the payroll warrants for the week ending February 7th and February 14th. No objections, those will be approved. The approval of the treasury warrants for February 10th and February 17th. No objections, those will be approved. And the approval of the pending contracts at February 17th as set forth in the spreadsheet identified as Exhibit 1, which spreadsheet is incorporated herein by reference.
Okay, bear with me. We have a number of contracts here. We've got a professional services agreement for DPW with Site Design Engineering. It's a not-to-exceed contract, not to exceed $225,000 over 3 years. We're not expected to spend that amount. It's more of a procurement number. And that is for engineering assistance for various town projects. We have several of these engineering contracts. We have a construction agreement with town administration with Marin Construction. The amount we have now, and the procurement officer can remind me what that is, because I didn't write it down. And this is for the construction of a new bathhouse at the Children's Beach concession. It's not the concession. If you recall, this project has a bit of a history. Bids came in significantly higher than the appropriation to redo the concession and the bathhouse, so we scaled it back to just the bathhouse. And there is funding available, and it's, what is the number again?
The amount is $795,800.
And what was the, while you're there, what was the bid for the entire project? It was too high.
1.4.
And how many bathrooms is that?
It's 2 big bathrooms.
Okay, we're gonna pull this contract out separate. We'll vote on the other ones, and then we'll vote on this one.
We have a service agreement for DPW with Daubert Heating and Air Conditioning, Inc. It's a not to exceed not to exceed contract, not to exceed $24,999 over 3 years, and that is for on-call plumbing services. We've been trying to get an on-call plumber under contract for a while now, so now we finally have gotten one. We have two service agreements for Our Island Home. One with Westcom Solutions, Inc., $24,512. The software agreement, the funding comes from the Island Home budget. The second is with E-Solutions, Inc., $9,500 for 3 years. This is a renewal contract for medical billing, and that also comes from the Island Home budget. We have a service agreement for DPW with Randy Afelt Heating and Cooling, not to exceed $24,999 over 3 years. That's for heating equipment repair and maintenance for the systems in the various town buildings. That comes from various budgets. Professional services agreement for DPW with Weston and Sampson, $55,000. This is for the design of a new DPW garage facility. Funding for this was approved at the 2015 annual town meeting. We have a reduction to a contract through an amendment for DPW with Woodard and Curran. It's a reduction of $419,500 in the contract for design for the Surfside wastewater treatment facility upgrade project. And lastly, we have a service agreement for town administration with General Code Publishers, $24,879. And this is to codify all town regulations. I think I've mentioned before to you that we're working to have a system that is very similar to the town code, where all the regulations are codified. We're in the process of gathering them all together and going to be sending them to General Code. And what they will do is codify them. And then as we amend regulations going forward, they will do the same thing they do with the town code. So at some point, once they have all of the regulations, our existing regulations, they're going to be newly formatted and ordered. We'll probably have to have a public hearing to re-adopt them in their newly numbered fashion, and then go forward from there. And at the same time, we're going to be getting information out to all the departments about what the process will be for regulation amendments. It's a little bit all over the board right now, so it's going to be one standard process.
Questions?
Go ahead.
I guess I had two. One was on the garage. Is that is that for this site, Kara, or is it for
It's for the DPW site, existing.
At the landfill.
out at the landfill?
One
Yep.
building's gonna come down, the new one will go up.
I just wanted to double check. I know we talked about it on capital at one point. And then my other question, Kara, if you could just describe the kind of reductions in scope of the wastewater facility engineering fees, I'd appreciate it.
I had wanted to start the survey work for the sewer extension projects, Nantucket Harbor, Shimo, plus Matticat, Somerset, Warren's Landing. With cutting those in half, basically, and just moving forward with the plus and Shimo, it didn't make sense to have that amount of money. And then with the authorization for the Surfside plant really just directed there, it was not appropriately applied into that contract. So we'll need to wait until that money is authorized.
I got it. Thank you.
Rick?
Just back to the first one, Libby, can you give me a sense for what types of projects? I assume that's not a sewer project, for example. So is it some?
It would be something like, we're currently working on redesigning the Town Pier parking lot.
That's actually the first project that we're going to have them do. What we have is we have a surveyor on call, and between planning and DPW, we have, I think, all of the engineering companies on the island under contract, so that we can solicit them to come assist us with projects quickly without having to go through an individual process for each particular project.
So are there separate contracts with each of these companies? And this is sort of the total of them to give you the flexibility to?
This is a number that we don't expect to reach.
Plus has their own contracts with the engineering companies. This
So
is for the DPW.
Right, but Plus has, I thought they were primarily for planning board advice and those kinds of things.
They
This-
also do designs for Mike for
For-
bike
for
paths and
bike paths?
sidewalks and that kind of thing. So they're basically on-call services for engineering design.
Right,
So-
and the money's coming out of their budgets, just so I understand.
This would be things like the town pier, like the historic bike path, or
Sort of, if we had the staff, we'd do them in-house, probably is the idea.
Correct.
instead of
but-
putting it out to bid and have to get an RFP and all that, this would be on call per hour, not to exceed this amount.
Okay, gotcha, thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna vote on everything but the construction agreement for, the boathouse. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's
All
fine.
opposed? None, seeing none? Okay. I am not prepared to vote on this contract. $750,000 for 2 bathrooms that are only used 3 months a year. I need to at least look at the plans.
Yeah, let's see what
Um,
we're talking about, Bobby.
You know,
790, Bobby.
790. You know what, I'd love to take these plans and send them to somebody like Huntington Homes and see what kind of prefab. We get a classroom delivered for the school for a third of this. Why can't we get a bathroom unit delivered and run some wheelchair ramps up to it? It's $750,000 for 2 bathrooms. I'm sorry.
So are they connected to the existing building?
And I
that's
know
part
that
of
they're
what-
there's a
not.
timeline and that we need to approve this contract to get it in by spring, but I can't do it.
It's a standalone building, and it's gone through HDC already, and there were modifications as a result of that. And it's
It's actually 4 bathrooms. It's a men's, a women's, and 2 family.
I want to see the plans. I want to know what we're getting for this. I want to see, the numbers are ludicrous. $790,000 for 4 bathrooms is just, it's like,
I don't disagree with you, but this is what we are
Uh,
running
well,
into.
I understand what
the
you're
contracts we've
recommending.
had.
Doesn't mean we have to approve it. So I want to see the plans from Heidi, and then I want to go from there. I want to reach out to a few, I think we need to look outside the box. And I'll take the plans and send them to a prefab company and see what they can build it for.
Well, it was written so that it could be done prefab, and it was found that that was not the most cost
I mean, I'd rather put porta potties down there for the summer than spend $790,000 for bathrooms. It's a lot of money. Well, I mean, at one point, we thought that was gonna be the bathrooms and the restaurant.
Correct, but
No.
that came in at 1.4 million.
Good, Bobby, just to follow, before we see the plans, who was the winning bidder? Are they new to us, or they've done other jobs for the town?
They're the same individuals doing the boathouse.
And did anybody
the
else
sc-
bid?
Yes,
And
One
this
person.
was the low bidder?
yes.
The other bid was, higher, 900, it was Northern, and it was $904,100.
Yeah.
And we actually had a before we sent this out for a secondary bid, we got together with the OPM, the low bidder from the $1.4 million bid, and, Kara and everyone in the same room when we discussed stick build versus bringing over a
How many square
prefab.
foot is this building?
I don't know if we have that.
We can get that.
1,500?
No, it's more than that.
It's lower than that.
More, I think it's
So
more
it's
than
like
that.
$1,000 a square foot for 4 bathrooms. I
Well,
just,
let's get the facts,
Yeah.
because I don't want that out now.
well, yeah, let's get the facts. I'm just not prepared to just rubber stamp
Ignore
this.
that last statement.
No,
If you're in
it-
the public,
Even
we'll
if
get
it's,
the facts.
if it's 1,000 square foot building, it's $790 a square foot. I mean,
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
we
Bobby.
putting gold fixtures in there? I mean,
Bobby, I think we got it.
Yeah, just let me see the plans.
I think the board's, in support. I know I choked on the, when we were on the CPC for the chicken coop at York Street. It was about $150,000 for a chicken coop.
Right.
It's a historic chicken coop.
Yeah, well, that's historic. This isn't.
And that's moving forward,
It's very smoothly, Rick.
gotcha, no questions, it hasn't come to us yet. That's $3,000 a square foot.
I don't mean to harp, but at some point we have to just say no. And anyway, we're moving on to public hearings. We're gonna go a little out of order here. We're gonna do the ambulance fund because Chief has a consultant here who needs to catch the 8 o'clock boat, so. We're gonna take item number 6 first, and then we'll go back to item number 1. Libby, do you wanna start, or you wanna just go right to the chief?
You can just go right to the chief, I think. He can explain it.
I'm not sure where we're at in the packet, guys. I think it's. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, member of the board, I've got Jeff Tassi here from Comstar Ambulance Billing Company to help us out, answer any kind of questions we have. We're here to discuss ambulance billing rates and how we can change those rates to increase our service level. We haven't changed our rates in over 6 years. New rates will generate $500,000 to $800,000 per year, primarily from the insurance companies. Policy decisions do have to be made to increase, do not have to be made to increase the financial burden to residents. So we can decide, most of this burden will go to the insurance companies. We can decide how much or if any we want to distribute to the residents or patients. Medicare and Medicaid patients will not be affected by these rates. They've got their own rates the government sets. We can't set those.
And Chief, remind us what percentage of ambulance riders that is?
It's a little over 50%.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. This is primarily to the 25, what do we say, 25? 27% of our patients who are private insurers. This is all it'll affect. So we've got a certain percentage that are uninsured and generally don't pay, and we've got the Medicare. So it's about 27% that this will affect.
And this is kind of a follow-up to our discussion of moving the level of service to the higher level and so
Correct.
forth. Yeah, gotcha.
Correct. I think Jeff can talk about where other towns sit compared to us. Right now, you can see, we didn't label the other towns. They're labeled up top, but Jeff wasn't comfortable giving out their specific rates without their specific permission, but I'll let him talk about where we stand.
Hi, good evening. As Chief Rudin mentioned, my name is Jeff Tassi from Comstar Ambulance Billing. And Chief had just reached out to me and kind of taken a look at the billing rates for the town of Nantucket. So what I did is I took a look at the rates of other Cape and Island communities. And as you can see by the chart there, the town of Nantucket's rates are kind of significantly low compared to what the standard is at this point in time. In discussing ambulance billing rates, Chief had mentioned that it doesn't affect Medicare or Medicaid patients. Basically, if there's a Medicare patient, there's a contracted amount that Medicare pays, and it doesn't matter what your rate is. So with your BLS rate at $475 or the service rate above that BLS rate $1,205, Medicare has X amount of which they allow, of which they pay 80%, and then the additional 20% is a person's copay or they have a secondary insurance. But that's no matter, where your rates are set, that Medicare rate is always going to be the same.
Question, if our rate is under Medicare, do they pay the lower?
Your rates aren't, but
They aren't.
yeah,
So
they're going to pay what
Still pay 80%.
what your rates are.
I got
The Medicare rate for BLS is around 360 something, give or take. I apologize, I don't have that exact number at the top of my head. And then with Medicaid patients, Medicaid has an amount that they pay, and there's not even any patient responsibility on that. So once again, it doesn't matter if you're $475 or $1,475, Medicaid is paying X. What other services are seeing with those higher rates is that private insurance companies are paying those higher rates less any copay or deductible. That's the patient's responsibility. But private insurance, a patient's going to have a copay or deductible, once again, no matter what your billing rates are. And that's why communities are kind of setting their rates on there. As the chief mentioned, you have about 27% of your patients are commercially insured. And that's where the revenue increase is mostly coming from, is that commercial insurance, based on other, both services on the Cape mainland and services on the other island.
Just, Bobby, can I ask you a question? Just sort of to be clear. So, commercial insurance, so if is this primarily going through their health insurance as a component thereof? So if they were a town employee, for example, and needed the services of the fire department, they would be processed through our normal health insurance, and those rates are whatever.
For the most part, yes. This is for the most
Blue
part.
Cross, Blue Shield, and all that kind of stuff.
Correct. In some,
Probably an 80-20 split. So if it's $1,000, the ambulance company, the insurance pick up 800.
800, the employee picks up 200, just for our see, gotcha, okay.
And in some cases, it could be, say, an auto insurance if it's a motor vehicle accident,
Yep.
or workers' comp insurance. But yes, primarily it is health insurance. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Just for your information, Jeff took a look at existing billings, and the average deductible he's seeing across, they do the billing for the majority of New England municipal ambulance services. The average deductible is $529 that the patient is responsible for. That's the average. That's what they've found. It's a lot. It is a lot.
Something just to keep in mind about deductibles is everybody has their personal insurance where there is a deductible, and a deductible does need to be met, whether it's to an ambulance service, whether it's to a primary care physician, whatever health activity they're going to. A portion of their deductible does go to that. In most insurance plans, you have a deductible that needs to be met for whatever type of medical service that you are receiving.
And then once you hit your deductible, you don't pay anything else.
Different plans are different, where Plan A could be that you have to meet your deductible 100% first. Other plans are it's a portion of your deductible for each service that you have. But to answer your question, yes, once that deductible is met in full, there's no more out-of-pocket cost except for a copay.
Sorry. These are our current rates on the left. The average rates are there. We got Calm Fire rates and Oak Bluffs rates. We tried to mirror our rates, or we're proposing to be identical to Oak Bluffs. Now, they're not the highest, but they're higher than the average. And one of the reasons we chose to do this is we don't want to have to go after the deductible. We don't want to have to send people to collections. So if someone doesn't pay the deductible, if a resident doesn't pay the deductible, we don't want to have to send them to collections or go after them. And if we charge a higher rate, the insurance companies will contribute a larger amount of money to the bill. And even if we don't collect the deductible, we still will make more money for the town than if we charge the average rate and collected the deductible.
Hold on, Chief, you're losing me here. You're basically saying that we're not gonna go after the deductible on any of our residents? I mean,
That-
we have a.
that's your
don't we have a-
choice.
No, it's not our choice. We have a fiduciary responsibility to go after people when they owe the town money. We can't just say, well, we got $1,000 from the insurance company, so we're not gonna chase you for the deductible because you didn't send us a check. I mean, it doesn't fly.
So
Let
it's
me-
like
let
an
me let Jeff
invita-
answer that.
It's like an invitation to everybody.
Yeah,
not
just
to
so,
pay,
you know
right?
what, we're gonna raise the rate, and we know you have a 20% deductible, but because we got more from the insurance company, don't bother to pay the bill. I mean, I don't know, but I just don't see how that works.
Most of the Cape departments do not send the bills to collections. So they ask for the money, they say this is the deductible. If people pay it, they pay it. If they don't, they,
Right.
let me
The
let-
two- So there are two different issues. One is whether you send the bill and whether you send it to collection. That's like an outside firm that goes.
Correct.
Excellent point, sir, that it is two separate things. I don't think the chief is saying you're not sending a bill. It's just you're not going to – it's a town decision on how you pursue to go after that. Every community is different, and those are decisions that are made by the community and how you want that billing policy to be established. But yeah, as far as sending the bill, there are certain Medicare regulations which require that to be sent. But as far as the collection procedures you're using, which is a separate entity, is at the decision of each community that we work with. I think what the chief was trying to say is many communities, what they do is they don't have harsh collection policies, and they have waiver policies available. Whereas if you're resident Smith and you have a larger deductible, and for whatever your financial reason, you can fill out a financial waiver, and the town would make a decision on whether to grant that financial waiver or not.
So that's making a little more sense to me, is if you can ask for a waiver,
But
but everybody,
Who grants a waiver? Is it this board? Is it?
That's for the community to decide.
in other communities,
It really varies from community to community. Some communities it depends if it's a fire district. Some it's the board, the district commissioners. Sometimes it's the town. Sometimes it would be the fire chief that would make the presentation to the board that person A, person B, person C, based on the evidence that they're supplying. So once again, I apologize. I can't tell you how that's done. That's just
Yep.
a town
No, I'm getting the idea.
town decision.
But, it's interesting, the deductible, just gotta sort of think about this. If my first bill is to the hospital for services, not needing an ambulance, and then it was a $10,000 bill and it meant my full deductible, then you're not dealing with the deductible any longer. I'm assuming that person has an ambulance run then. You know, I mean, it's sort of,
Well,
I
it all
mean, does the
depends,
hospital
like,
waive all the deductibles
if you have
too?
very good
And we're all
insurance,
paying
you
in
have
the end? I don't
you
know.
have an 80-20 deductible to a certain amount, and then it's 100% coverage.
Yeah.
But most people's insurance, they have an 80-20 deductible that carries through
Right.
for the first million, so they're still continuing to pay that 20%.
Right, but some people have to meet the deductible before they, it depends on the pub, before they get anything
Right.
public. So there are
Right.
lots of different things here.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no set formula here.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's excellent point. Unfortunately, there's no set formula just because everybody's insurance is different. But for the most part, I think the point is that the rates are mostly affecting the private insurances because Medicare and Medicaid have those contracted rates. So your billing rates isn't going to affect a Medicare or a Medicaid patient one bit.
And I'll just make a wise comment, maybe not wise, I was gonna use the other word, but,
Means
and then
almost like sarcastic
yeah,
or-
sarcastic, there we go. And you wonder why our insurance goes up 15 or 18% a year. If you ever want a proof that the system is broken,
Right.
the fact that you get bills, but some people pay and other people don't, and some people don't pay anything, it just seems,
And those that buy the insurance are
seems
paying
crazy.
for all of this, and
Yeah,
that's all,
like,
in our case, we have 700 employees between the school and the town, we're paying for all of that as taxpayers.
yeah, it's just, the system is a mess.
Is there any more, do we have more of a presentation here, or is that it?
Yeah, we're drifting off into other things.
I want to go back to that slide at some
will.
point, Chief.
So we kind of went over this. Financial waivers can be based on whatever we choose them to be. And that's it. So
Okay.
that's the.
So, let's start here. We're at 475 right now
Correct.
for basic life support, which is all we have right now. We don't have ALS, so let's just.
Correct. But
Let's
in the next year,
concentrate on
we-
those top two lines, because we don't have ALS, ALS1, ALS2, so
Bobby, just one quick question. If I jump in an ambulance, do I get billed if I receive ALS services versus not?
if you get an
Um,
ambulance, you get billed.
Right, but
Right.
there was ALS rates and non-ALS rates, but
Right.
We don't have ALS
But
here.
once we
When
do,
we have
everybody
ALS, if
will
you
get
get
the-
treated at the ALS level, then you would get billed at the ALS level.
but if
Correct.
you don't get treated at the ALS,
Then you get
like-
treated at the BLS level and get billed at the BLS level. We
Got
have
it,
to
thank
do,
you.
Jeff can tell you, we have to do certain things. We have to start an IV, we have to do something that's ALS related
To
before we can.
qualify.
So until we're ALS qualified, I don't know if we necessarily need to concentrate on those rates.
We don't need to concentrate on it, but it would be,
Nice to set up.
it'd be nice to have it all set now, so that within the next
Yeah.
year, when we start providing that, we can just roll
Well,
into
are
that.
we really
without-
going to be there in a year?
We anticipate being there in approximately a year, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll believe that when I see it. But
Okay.
anyway, let's start with BLS, because we're going from 475 to 1752. That's the proposal.
That's what we were proposed, correct.
All right, so that, to me, is way over the top. I mean, I'm a firm believer in baby steps. I'd go to 950 this year. I mean, I'm considering doubling it, but quadrupling it is just because Oak Bluffs charges it. The COM fire rates, which is, what is that?
Senator Rossville, Marston's Mills,
That's Marston's Mills.
right.
You know, I did go back, if you can go back one slide, Chief. One thing that jumped up at me was
Right.
mileage. We have 12 miles, and that's a stretch for us, most of our ambulance calls. I mean, that's
It's
like
$12 per mile,
$12 per mile. Everybody else is,
right.
you know, I would be comfortable with like 950 or 1,000, but to just jump from 475 to 1,700 is just, it's a monumental jump.
but-
Because even if you say, okay, 20% of that, you're going from 20% of 475, which is roughly $90, to 17% of this, which is $180. It's,
But you're talking about the 20% being the copay issue again. just
right,
so I
and
know
then
where
what
you
about the
are.
poor people that don't even have insurance?
Right, but there are a lot of different issues there. In other words, some people have met their deductibles and their copays are different, and so I just think one thing you gotta think about, if we wanna step it and we wanna pay for the program, we've
But-
gotta be
But
prepared.
we're
I
not,
think- well,
what program are
the-
we paying for?
well,
Because we haven't upgraded anything yet.
No, but the next year.
Well, I would say
So let's be prepared. Now, I think what the chief is saying.
And what I'm saying is you go up 100%, you go up to 950 now, and then when ALS kicks in, then we can go up again.
Go up again to
But right now, it's,
1,700.
I'd like to step it, not just jump all of a sudden now and find out that even though we think we're gonna be at ALS in a year, we may not be there for 2. You know, when we get to ALS, then we jump it again. But for right now, I'd be more, myself would be more comfortable with a 100% increase and not a 300% increase.
Does that,
If we didn't go after the deductible, if we chose not to send them to collections, then
But
would
that's
be-
basically sending a message to everyone who's listening
Right.
tonight, that don't pay your deductible, which
Yep.
I have an issue with. I mean.
we could
you're-
not collect the deductible, go to the higher rate, and still make more money than if we charge the average rate and force, and send everybody to collections. So,
yeah.
I don't know, something sticks in my craw that we're in the business to
Right, I
provide a
think we-
service, not to make money.
Right.
We've been providing the service at 475, and we haven't gone bankrupt, so.
Yeah, but we need, but
We're
if
not-
you wanna enhance the service, then we have to make the money to enhance it, which was part of what was presented.
right.
So
The
I'm
cost
trying-
per
are we trying
ambulance
to
run
build
is
a-
in excess of
Are
$1,200
we trying to build a
call.
war chest here? Is that what we're trying to do?
No, I think he's just trying to say, this
No,
is
I'm-
what
I'm-
it's gonna cost, Bobby. to
Well, I
run the
understand that, and
program.
when it gets to that cost, then we raise the rates accordingly, but we're not providing any more service at this point, other than what we're doing right now, but we're doubling or
I
tripling or
understand. So-
quadrupling the rates.
So I think we just want to make sure the chief understands that distinction. And does that impact how we're proceeding to get geared up, impact anything else you're doing? Does it impact your budgets until you get up? You know what I mean? What's the consequence?
Right, are we trying to, I guess my question is, are we raising these rates to build up a war chest to increase our budget a year from now? Or are we just raising our rates because this is what everybody else is charging? I mean, if we're providing ALS and it costs $3,200 per ambulance call for ALS, I have no problem charging that. But if we're raising our rates just because that's what everybody else is charging, but we're providing the same service we're providing right now at 475, just to build up an extra extra amount of, because we can bill more, I don't necessarily want to bill people more unless we have to bill them more. Do you
Right.
understand what I'm
No, I
saying?
understand what you're saying. Now, right now, just doing an ambulance call on island, it's in excess of $1,200 is our expense per ambulance ride. So that's what it costs. We're not making money. We don't make money. The fire department's a money loser. We don't make money.
So
and if
it's
we
kind of,
start-
it's like coming out of the general fund. If you were
It-
trying
it
to look
is.
at this like the landfill and said it
Well,
was
that's-
an enterprise fund,
Right.
Bobby, the subsidy, people like use that word, is coming from the general fund.
Well, now we're getting to a number I understand. If it's $1,200 for ambulance call now,
That's what
then
it costs
what we
on
should
island.
be charging, is
And we also want to
$1,200.
start providing ambulance calls off island, so we could drive someone up. If nobody was available, no private ambulance company, if a resident needed to go to Mass General on a boat today, we would like to be able to provide that. And we can't do it if we're going to lose money. And it,
And that way it would
Do we have the
save the money.
ambulances available to do that?
we won't until after July 1st. We're asking for another ambulance, and we're asking for additional staff.
And this, Chief, and, you know, if I could help out here, I believe that's gonna save folks money who aren't going to be receiving medical flights. If
Correct.
they're taking an ambulance, that's some of the
will-
logic
It's a
behind it.
much lower rate than what a helicopter would charge, correct.
So important to know that starting in the next fiscal year, we are increasing our commitment in terms of costs to get ready to do
Right.
this.
We gave a 2-year plan to get up to
Yeah,
to get up to
and it
full
get-
ALS
it's sort of
service. So
getting phased
next year,
in,
there's
Bobby.
4 additional paramedics that are going to be hired. There's an additional ambulance that's going to be added. There's additional ALS equipment that's going to be added to 2 of the ambulances next year. All at a significant cost. So increasing the rates to what we proposed or something close to it is close to enough or around enough to pay for everything over the next, most of it over the next 2 years.
And just from a budget point of view, forgetting whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I assume that the budget for next year is constructed with these higher costs, and is it anticipating these fees or not yet? And it's a, so-called balanced budget going to the finance committee, right? Yeah, it's somewhat related, Bobby, because if it was to end up with a different bottom line, we'd have to adjust someplace.
I believe they were, Brian can probably help. I believe they were taken into consideration, but it was more, these fee increases were needed for a long-term balancing of this ALS increased
So
staffing
maybe they're
proposal.
phased in a little later and
Yeah, we were
often
only
hear-
counting on a very small, we were counting on not getting to ALS until about this time next year. So we weren't counting on dramatically increased rates throughout next year.
So some of these additional costs that we're talking about for ALS are going to be in the ambulance reserve fund. And one of the ways to prepare is obviously what the chief has proposed is to raise the BLS rates now to start. We have proposed in there to hire 2 people in the reserve fund starting in January, not starting right away. And there's 2 people in the general fund to be estimated to be hired in July. There's additional ambulances that need to be purchased. If we go to ALS, there's additional equipment to outfit the ambulances that we have that we need to purchase. So we're trying to, this is also done to not drain retained earnings in the ambulance reserve fund all the way down, because ambulances get progressively more expensive year over year. So by changing this, we're building up a little bit of the ability to phase this program in. So if we don't change the rates, it will put stress on whether we can do ALS as fast as or in the time frame the chief would like. So,
Okay. Any other questions from the board? This is a public hearing, even though it might not seem like it. So does anyone in the public have a comment on this? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing portion of this meeting. And I will look to my board for recommendations or proposals.
Bobby, I would think, rather than just going to 925, because I'm not sure the impact here, but why not go to, I'm a little more aggressive than you are perhaps. So go to 1,200 for a year, but make a commitment now to get to the 1,700 the following year, so we all know where we're headed here.
You know what, I have
You
no
know?
problem going to the average rate, Rick, which is 1205, because that's what the chief says it costs us. I don't want us to lose money on the ambulance call.
Right.
And I'm glad that he gave me that number, because I wasn't aware of that
Right.
number.
That would make sense.
And
to
I
me.
have no problem going to these rates once we start AOLS, because that's what it costs. I mean, I'm a firm believer, and you charge what it costs you to run a call, whether it's,
Well,
2,000 or
Yeah.
3,000, or whatever.
So the question I'm curious about is, after we do this, and I'm glad the consultant's here to maybe answer this, is, as towns raise their rates in other communities, how do those affect what the reimbursement rate is that insurance companies are paying? So right now, we're basically, in essence, if the insurance company is billing out, $2,000 for the ambulance ride, as we heard a couple weeks ago, and now, and we're only charging $475, what are they going to bill out in the future? Like, what are the parameters holding them in from just going up, up, and up? Is that clear?
Yes, I understand your question, and unfortunately, I'm not going to have a great answer for that.
It's okay.
What I can tell you is right now, these rates are being reimbursed by private insurance companies, but unfortunately, I understand your question of, well, what's going to happen tomorrow, but I don't have an intelligent response to that, because I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Could what the insurance companies reimbursing change tomorrow? Absolutely, they could. But as of right now, the private insurance companies are reimbursing this rate. I think what other communities have done in the past, if they've kind of taken a look at their rates on an annual basis, as the other gentleman just mentioned, the cost of an ambulance, it just increases every year, because everything costs more money from every year. The ambulance itself, the equipment that you need. Your primary payer is Medicare. Medicare stays pretty constant every year, but in fact this year the Medicare rates have gone down 0.4%. So if nothing changed with you folks, you would have 0.4% less Medicare
Right.
revenue this year.
The federal government can't wait to keep transferring costs to us.
Yeah. Maybe another way I'm just looking at it is, I remember getting an accident a couple years back, and it was, I got a $2,000 bill for the ambulance from my insurance company, and then I was kind of surprised to hear that the town charges $475. So the insurance company made $1,500. All right, they're quadrupling the threefold. They're making a profit. So if we go up again, are they going to raise it again, coming back the other way? Because in a sense, we're already paying through it collectively through all of our insurances. So by raising it more, we're actually going to cost ourselves more in the bigger picture. Do you hear what I'm saying?
I think what you have to look at here, totally get what you're saying, is that what is Medicare and reimbursed for an ambulance ride now? About $500?
No, for BLS it's 360
Okay,
something.
So we charge $1,200. Medicare gives us $360. The rest of that gets eaten by us. The people that are paying that are sitting right here at this table. You know, we have private insurance, and we raise the rates because we're trying to make up for the Medicare. But guess what happens to our premiums? They go up through the roof, because the insurance companies aren't in the business to lose money. If they're saying, okay, I gotta pay $1,800 for an ambulance ride, then guess what my premium's gonna do next year? It's gonna go up 15 or 20%. So, you know, I know that us keeping our rates lower than all the other towns isn't gonna necessarily affect what my insurance rate's gonna be, but I just think it's just,
No, I
you know,
hear you,
if
because
more
we're-
towns did what we did, then maybe our insurance rate wouldn't go up 15 to 20% every year. So,
We're essentially
you know,
self-insured,
if our
Bobby,
ambulance
so-
if our ambulance call costs us roughly $1,200 per call, then that's what we should charge. We shouldn't be making a profit on the small percentage, the 27% that have insurance to cover the shortfalls of Medicare or the people that don't have insurance. That should just be a part of being in the ambulance business. I mean, we don't charge, I just,
Yeah, I think it makes sense, Bobby. I just wanted to kind of get some of my concerns out there because I'm trying to
Right.
just, I think we're all struggling to grapple with this, and I think we're all, going to move along with kind of the average rate. I think that's where we're going, and maybe we'll we'll assess the ALS rate when
when
we
we
get
get to
there.
ALS, whatever that rate is, whatever the chief tells us it costs us per call, that's what we'll charge for the rate, but.
And then these should be, go up cost of living every year, so we aren't in this situation again in 5 years. I think that's,
Yeah, we should review these every year,
Yeah.
not just every
Yeah, all
what's
our
it,
fees.
2000
all the
and,
fees should go up somewhat.
2006 was the last, what'd you say, chief? 6 years since we've gone up?
6 years.
Yes.
Yeah, so we should look at this
2010,
every year.
2010.
6 years.
6 years, yeah.
So do we have a
Sounds-
motion to accept the average rates and then reassess it in a year?
Is that your motion, Matt?
Well, that's,
Can I have one question?
Yep.
Can we also use the average rates but add in the ferry service too? Because if we do,
If we have to transport somebody
I
off
think that's
island,
out of
absolutely.
pocket.
we have, so
Yeah.
if we could do the average rates with the ferry service added in there, because that's a significant expense, and we lose a ton of money if we
It's
don't
added in
have
there
that.
when we use the ferry.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have no problem with that. That's sort of what I said at the start.
that's what
12 yeah.
that's what you said.
So
okay.
average rates, Matt's motion is to assess these at the average rates plus a ferry service if need be. Rick, did you
But
second that?
Yeah, I'm happy to, but let's round it off, whatever I don't know what the average rate is, but you don't want to charge,
1205, chief,
so,
and then $32 for mileage. Is that about the average rate?
That's about the average, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to, can we set the ALS rates in there just the same as the average, so when we do start providing, we don't have to come to you right away, or
That's fine.
we can't do it
That's
until we start
fine,
providing?
let's start with a 1950, but I think
Sure.
that's probably gonna have to go up when you actually start it, so.
Well, I think so, because
Yeah.
if we bill 1950, we're not going to collect, and the 1200, we'll bill it, but we don't get that full
All right,
1250
so
from insurance companies. It's
We're
gonna,
gonna
we'll probably
take,
get 1,000 maybe.
just for clarity, BLS base rate, BLS non-emergency will stay at 1205. ALS1, ALS1, ALS2 will be 1950, 1950, 310. Mileage will stay at 32. Defibrillation will be 100, oxygen will be 47, and then ferry service will be 250? Oh, 850.
It's 850, yeah.
850, and then what about, the paramedic intercept with the Coast Guard, we'll leave that where it is? That doesn't happen very often, but it
I
sometimes
don't know if
does,
it's
right?
ever happened, but it
It's
couldn't
good to
hurt.
have it in there.
Sure.
So that will be the column,
Okay.
all right? That's your motion, Matt?
Sounds good.
Is there a second, Rick?
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, chief.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank
Look
you.
forward to a single-payer system.
Okay, we're gonna go back to the beginning of our public hearings. We're gonna have a public hearing to consider the application for a license type for seasonal wine malt beverage restaurant to seasonal wine malt beverage club license for Long Table LSC. Gentlemen,
Good
how
evening.
are you?
Good evening to the board. Very good, thank you. My name is Ethan Dupre.
Just, there you go.
Good evening. My name is Jed Dupre. I'm owner-manager of Merceau.
I'd love to just start to concisely read a small description of our application, which might set us on the right direction. Merceau is seeking a change of license type from its current license of Section 12 Restaurant Malt and Wine to Section 12 Club Malt and Wine. The proposed concept to take place at 18 Broad Street will be a membership-based culture club focused on bringing preeminent speakers in their particular discipline from around the world to the club, whose transportation, lodging, and per diem expenses will be funded by the club membership. Invited speakers and presenters will cover a broad range of disciplines within the humanities, including authors, artists, museum curators, chefs, professors, and distinguished persons of note. In conjunction with welcoming these presenters to Nantucket Island, the club will offer its members unique travel opportunities to visit and experience the art, projects, and work of our invited speakers in their own local environments. The space at 18 Broad Street will serve to host small forums with welcome presenters, as well as provide members a space to converse and share together in an intimate environment. The club will be a seasonal operation and open from May through September, as well as Thanksgiving and Christmas straw holidays. The hours of operation will be 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. Monday through Sunday. A small food offering as well as malt and wine offering will be available to members for refreshment. This proposed project does not change from any of the pre-approved regulations already granted by the current Section 12 malt and wine restaurant license, as well as the common victual license. We appreciate your consideration for this change of license type. And just as a side note as well, we met previously with the board, with the head of police, fire department, zoning, and boarding, just to make sure that all the ways were clear and there were no amendments that needed to be made on any of those routes as well. And in addition to that, we're not asking for any change of occupancy, which we already have down at 18 Broad Street, and we're not looking to change any of the physical locale floor plan and or the physical plant there. So it'll be remaining the same as we have currently.
Okay. I have one question. Amy, in our packet anyway, Bob Bates had some concerns. Have those been
Yes.
addressed?
Yes, like he said, he met with licensing yesterday, and fire department was there, and they're going to make no changes. Same occupancy, and their entertainment license does allow for the amplification through the computer speakers, but it's going to be speakers and that sort of thing, so it won't affect it at all.
Okay.
So
And
yes,
I take it all your members will have cards. The general public won't be allowed in unless they're a member of the club.
Correct, yes.
And will there be a charge to the members? How does that work?
It would be a fee-based membership, yes, exactly right.
Is there a limit on the number of members? Is there-
There would be eventually a cap once we understand kind of what the flow and interest of the club would be.
But your occupancy is based on.
Occupancy would not
So even if
go
you had
above at any
300
time.
members,
Exactly
you can't
right.
go over your occupancy.
Correct, yes.
Probably goes the same at the golf clubs,
Yeah,
too.
yeah, it's like the Angles Club or anything else. Any other this is a public hearing. Does anyone from the public have questions about this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Questions from the board? Motion?
I think we're looking for the next great health expert. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Be the
All
first
those in
speaker.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, appreciate that.
And I'm abstaining on it. I just have, it's kind of, I have a funny feeling about.
So
this-
3-1 abstention.
Yeah, and one abstention. I just have a funny feeling about, from a policy standpoint, and I understand what you guys are trying to do, but when the clubs did open, there was a huge impact on some of the businesses. And if this is the direction we're going, if people have to pay money to come get a sandwich or something natural, and we're different than you guys, and I get that. But it's a different model than what we've presented to the world up till this point. And I think the island is sort of shifting, and, I'm not so sure. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about it, which is why I didn't vote against it. But it's just a funny feeling.
Right, so if
Take-
you end up
take
with
note.
restaurants going to clubs,
Yeah,
just
and
to
all the
take an
as
extension.
an example, if our
Right.
downtown becomes, a bunch of closed clubs, is that a positive? You guys are all set, you got yours, but is that a direction? I just think more thought should go into it. Is that what we want to be encouraging? If someone comes to visit to Nantucket, they can't go in this building, they can't go in this one, they can't go in the next one. I think it's.
So there's gonna be a sign on the door that says members only,
Exactly,
in effect.
yeah. So,
Agreed, yes.
yeah.
To well.
That's why I abstained. Not that I don't like your stuff, I think it's great, but,
Thank you, appreciate that, thanks, yes.
all right, thanks.
Okay, next is a public hearing to consider the petition from National Grid Nantucket Electric Company Plan 200900974 to install underground facilities at 7 locations on Milk Street and Wind Street in connection with the Humming Pond Bike Path Extension. Is there anyone here from National Grid or, Steve tonight? I think, this is one that normally if Steve wasn't here, I'd be complaining, but this one's pretty straightforward. This is to move the poles.
This is the bike path
This is
issue?
the bike path. We gotta get the poles from one side of the road to the other. There is some concerns from the water company about a couple of mains, which I'm sure that they'll work out. This is a public hearing. Is anyone here that has questions or concerns from the public? Yes, sir. You got to come up to the mic and identify yourself, sorry.
John Miller, I live
Come a
at
long way, haven't we, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I know. We really have. I live at 53 Milk Street. I'm just interested in the timeline for it, Bob.
You know what, I can't answer that for you, but I'm assuming it's going to be pretty quick, because I know we want to try to get this bike path done before
Okay.
spring, so.
All right. Thank you.
For those of you who didn't get the inside joke, Mr. Miller was my teacher in middle school, so.
Lovely.
Mine too.
You've come out great, Bobby.
Yeah, he did it, one of the influences on me. Anyway, questions or concerns from the board?
The only one, I know there was a mention about the lights over on that side, but I'm sure that's being addressed.
Yeah, I know we
Streetlights
talked
being
about
moved.
that for the observatory not to, so I don't think it's.
Just to make a comment on that, there were never any lights proposed anyway.
Right.
Okay. Good.
Dave, did you want to make a comment?
I was just going to echo Libby's comment.
Okay, great. All right, do I have a motion from the board? I did close it. I'll do it again, though. Seeing no public comment, I'll close the public hearing.
Make a motion to approve the license to move the poles.
Is there a second?
Yeah, second, as long as they address the one comments, concerns.
Yes.
Second
All
that.
right. Second, there's a motion made to approve it with, coordinating with water comment. It's been seconded by Matt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one. Public hearing to consider the petition of National Grid and Nantucket Electric Company Plan 208-53509 to install a new handhold 4.2 and a 1x3-inch Schedule 40C PVC conduit northerly 23 feet from westerly 42 feet across Sankaty Road to handhold 4-14. Did everybody have a chance to look at the?
I
The
did, and the water comment wants 48 hours notice again, so I'd like make that part of a motion.
Okay, wait, we have to
All right.
do the public hearing
Okay.
part. Any comments or concerns from the public? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Motion, Matt?
Yeah, so water comment has the same concerns, 48 hours. I'd like to approve it based on that. DPW asks that any disturbed areas off the paved surface but within the right-of-way need to be brought back to equal or better. And they also said related to the 42-inch section conduit, installation needs to be done using drilling, or the work has to wait till April 15th. So, there you go. Thank you. That's a short version.
Yeah, I would hope we wouldn't have to go through this each time.
Yeah.
So is the policy clear enough that those conditions are automatically
Let's put through that.
assumed to move forward?
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next, the public hearing to consider a petition for National Grid, Nantucket Electric Company for Plan 202-07504 to install a new handhold 2-1 and a 1x3-inch conduit Schedule 40C PVC 30 feet southeasterly across Joy Street and 18 feet southeasterly to pole number 2. This is a public hearing. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Comments or motions from the board?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have a public hearing to consider adoption of the following fees associated with mobile food units. The annual license fee of $300 and a special event daily fee for the town of Nantucket locations of $100. Amy?
And I'm going to abstain because it
That's
could be
gonna-
seen as competition.
I
don't
understand.
speak as a
Matt will be recusing himself from this, and he will be
Yes.
joining the public. I think he may have a comment. Amy, go ahead.
Yes, so these are the fees that we discussed with the new policy that would be for any and all mobile food units operating on the island. It would be a license fee of $300, annual fee that's currently $100, and then the $100 fee would be for special events, mobile food units off island that come for special events, and that's a daily fee. And that's in addition to the existing health department inspection fee, so that would be separate. So these are license fees to go along with the new policy.
So
Okay.
really, the main thing here is 100 to 300.
Correct.
gather, and that's
Correct.
an
That
an-
would be the annual license fee
That's an
for.
annual fee per truck?
Correct.
or
So
per
even
whatever-
if they're
whatever
on
it is?
private property or town property, as we discussed, we're going to be doing an RFP bidding process for some of those town spots at town beaches.
I have a question for Roberto. These trucks, do they have a mortar and brick location that they prep their food? Do all of them, except for maybe like the ice cream trucks?
Every mobile food vendor has a base of operations.
So that location is already charged a landfill fee and
Yes.
all the other fees that a regular restaurant would have?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And real estate taxes or, whatever
Correct,
goes with
correct.
owning
So
a
it's just
piece
an
of property.
extension of that mortar and brick location?
Correct.
All right. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the public like to make comment? Matt?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the playing field is fair. I looked, and if it is, that's great, but I looked it up, and to run a sandwich shop here on the island, a small place, landfill fees, $1,540, common vic license, $50, fire department, $75, building department's $150. Those are all inspection fees yearly. We also have, since we're brick and mortar, you have the fire extinguishers that guys have to come every year. You have an alarm system now that's going to cost us about $1,000 a year. You have to have 2 lines to your building, et cetera. When you add all that up, it's about $3,285 a year. And so I just want to make sure that the fees to someone doing the same business, similar or same business, are fair and the same. So that's my only.
So my question then
Concern.
is to Roberto, if they have a brick and mortar, they're paying all those fees as well?
Correct.
So-
And every mobile food vendor has a base of operations on island. We don't allow off island ones that we can't inspect.
So what about the daily license, the special event? Do they still have a brick and mortar here that they prep their food? They don't bring it from off island?
They can't.
So I
they're
guess, Matt,
supposed to
for
have it here.
$300, you ought to get a food truck and having something natural to go.
And
Yeah.
Could we go back on that, though, just a minute, Bobby? And
Yeah.
sort of, I don't, my sense would be the prep area for some of these trucks might be in a house. Or are they? I'd like to make it clear. I think Matt's talking, what I hear is.
It has to be a commercial kitchen.
Is a commercial kitchen. So the fees for a commercial kitchen, whether they're preparing food for a truck or for 500 sandwiches an hour, are the same inspection fees?
Correct. Commercial
Just so we're
kitchens.
clear.
Yes. All commercial kitchens are subject to the same inspections, same fees. Residential kitchens cannot be a base of operations for a mobile food vendor, for example.
So if we were lining them up side by side, just to sort of go through this, you'd see a standalone sandwich shop and a kitchen for a truck. You'd find the same fees for all those inspections.
Yes, with the brick and mortar, exactly. You'll see the two side by side because they are required to have the brick and mortar facility. So they would have all the same inspection fees, all the same permitting fees from the health department, and they will actually have an added fee because it's a mobile food.
Oh, now we're gonna have to reduce that to make it even. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No-
Any
no-
other
The
public
landfill
comment?
I can't speak to. Yeah, the landfill fees, certain other business fees and things like that, the Board of Health doesn't have control over. We have control over only the permitting fees for the food. I can't speak for the other permit fees.
So it might be worth answering the next question then. So the landfill fee, if you're in an office, you pay X. If you're something else, you're a restaurant, you pay Y. And if you're a base for a mobile food unit, you pay.
A base for a mobile food vendor is a commercial kitchen.
So he's paying the same.
He's paying a
landfill-
commercial
He ought to
kitchen
be
rate.
saying the same landfill fee. Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions from the public? Thank you, Roberto. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Comments, recommendations, motions?
Just one comment, Bobby. I think it's, or just one question first. Are we going to keep the kind of moratorium on new food trucks continuing into the future, or what's kind of the thought on that, Amy?
We approved it last week, the number of trucks and locations, and
Right.
it's gonna go out to bid for like certain beaches.
Right.
That was 2
Right.
weeks ago, wasn't it?
Correct. So basically, in town spaces that we can have a food truck, like we can't have it at Jetties or Children's because of concession contracts, but it'd be like at Madaket, My Comet, and Dionis. 2 spots each, so 6 spots would be part of the bidding process. And then Land Bank does allow some there, but it's limited as well.
Right. But,
Yeah.
but basically the changes, you could essentially, there could be, 15 more food trucks on the island.
If they have, private location.
Private locations,
Private
like the
location.
brewery,
Yeah.
for example, where they have 3 or 4.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, we can't control, well, they'll pay
Well,
the
we
fee, but we can't control where they park.
We
But they
couldn't-
can't park on a
Right.
public street.
We couldn't control that, it'd be like a caterer
Right.
essentially.
They can't drive
Right.
around and just park on Main
Yeah, and the
Street.
roaming part was, as we talked about, just like ice cream type of things,
Right.
and a limited number that can do a roaming
Yep.
type of
No, I
license.
understand. And I guess just thank you, Amy, for answering that. I guess just my comment is I think it's, I hear Matt's concerns and I think they're important, but I do think it is nice. There's a lot of young people who are starting these, and I kind of support them in trying to start a small business, and they're not making huge margins on these. They're
Mhm.
just trying to do something they love and put out food as a service for people.
All right, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move the fee of 300 and the $100 a day for, what are they, special events or?
Is there a second?
I'll second it, Bob.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Next, Matt, you coming back? We got a public hearing to consider amending Chapter 200 Traffic Rules, Regulations, including language regarding courtesy vans and establishing associated fees. And then we're gonna talk about including paid parking at 2 fairgrounds, and municipal parking lot associated fees, and then we're gonna talk about a review of the residential parking permit fees. Chief, I guess you're up. Matt, will you take the helm?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. At the request of the board, I was asked to look at a couple of different scenarios. One was a permit process for people to park in the 2FG parking lot who cannot, who for instance don't have a parking space at their home or whatever, and because of the regulations that don't allow you to park for more than 96 hours, on a residential street, they have a problem when they go off on extended vacations. So we proposed some language that could be added to the traffic regs that would create a permit specifically allowing long-term parking in the 2FG lot. Currently, the regulations allow somebody to park there for 7 days. After 7 days, they have to move. What this permit would do we're suggesting 30 days, you can make it whatever you want to, 60, 90 days, whatever. But in any event, the first 7 days would be free, and then there'd be a fee for each additional day. They'd come into the police station, they'd pay for a permit, tell us, when they're gonna be there, when they're leaving, and we would assess the fee, and they'd put the permit on their windshield.
Chief, just remind me, the 7 days, is that the same as on a residential street?
No,
Or is that the
it's a
different?
little bit longer.
Little bit long,
Yes.
not a whole lot, it's just
Yeah, I think it's 4 days versus 7 days.
7?
Yeah.
Gotcha, thanks.
And in order to accomplish this, we would need to add the language to 213.5 that would create the permit. We'd need to establish a time period to which it's allowed, and we're suggesting some specific language to basically allow it from after Labor Day to up to right before Memorial Day. We'd have to renumber a couple of the sections, and all of the suggested language is included in this package. We then add language to create a long-term parking permit and establish the fee. We're suggesting, as a starting place for discussion, $10 a day, and we only suggested that because that's what it costs for a non-resident to come here and get a parking permit during the summer is $10 a day. So it could be set whatever you decide. But if you went by our recommendation, for somebody to park there for 30 days, it would be a cost of $230.
And if it proved super popular, you'd have to then think about rationing or something else, but the idea is just to get started and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we can hold, I can't remember, 100 cars over there, something like that. I don't see that.
Right.
If it got popular, we'd have some other options.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
That's, I think that sounds fine, Chief. Just a general concern, I think it's really great we're using the space, for parking, and I just don't want us to constantly think that that's gonna be parking all the way in the future, and just remind us that we might have to, prepare a little bit and how we want to have a municipal parking lot somewhere, or do we
So
want
when
that?
that disappears into housing or something else,
Yeah,
what's the alternative?
yep,
And so I'm sure people are thinking about that already, right?
yep.
Right.
And I'm sure Chief won't mind not having to run a parking lot.
Not exactly on my list of experiences, that's for sure.
Well, we're just helping you build a resume here
There
on
you go.
Nantucket.
So do we want to do these one at a time, Bobby? So
Sure.
just- Yeah, so.
Do we have any public comment on this section? Okay, seeing none, John, this is on the long-term parking permit.
Long-term parking. John Stover. On the long-term parking, we're talking about cars that are parked on the street. Person buys a house or rents his space to live, and he parks his car on the road just like he has forever. And you've made a regulation that forces him to move after 4 days, and why not just change the regulation so that he can stay there?
Because we can't have 45, 50 cars parked on all the little side streets all winter when we need to plow and deal with all the stuff, you know. We're not Nantucket in 1970 when there were 22,000 people living here and people leave their cars on Pine Street for 5 months. We can't do it anymore. So, you know, people have to, you can't do it in any other town where you've got 15,000 people living, or 12,000, or whatever the number is. At some point, we have to say you can't do it anymore. You know, you just can't leave your car on a downtown street when we have to snow plow and everything else. You know, it's just, you gotta make arrangements.
And I think you've addressed the snowplow issues, though. In downtown, you
But-
can't park
But not, well,
if the snow's over 2 inches.
but if their car is left there for 30 days and the snow comes during that 30 days, there's nobody to move the car, so then what do we do?
They're in Florida.
Right. That's the problem that we have, John. You know, it's
And-
one
and we-
thing,
and-
if their people are here, they can move the car. But if they're gone, they go to Florida for a month or 2 months or whatever, and they leave their car on one of these downtown streets, and then we get a foot of snow, we end up
So
burying it.
is the regulation all about winter parking, or is it the whole year?
No, it's the whole year.
It's the whole year.
I mean, you can't,
Well, this particular thing is only in effect
Has-
during the off-season.
Yeah,
When
the parking here, but
Right.
but the limits on parking on residential streets, whatever it is,
it's year-round.
are year-round.
Year-round.
If I could just give an example of where we have a problem that's not snow-related. You know, there's construction going on now at the Congregational Church, which they have a parking lot in which they pretty much reserve generally for their elderly members during church services. But because of the construction, that lot is now closed, and, you know, we got calls that there's no parking on the street, on Center Street and the side streets. And we went up there and we looked and we identified almost 20 vehicles that had been parked there for weeks on those side streets that, you know, had been, and one of them was even covered with a tarp.
know the
And,
one you're talking
you know. and-
He
and-
knows the vehicle.
Yeah, and anyway.
not mine.
But my
I
point.
know, I'm not claiming that.
But my point is, we had to then contact these people and say, look, you know, you need to move the car and just to clear up parking so that people had places to
get to
park to go to
church.
church. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my concern, frankly, is that if it's me and I happen to go away for 2 weeks, then I have this parking problem because I went away for a 2-week vacation. And I certainly understand having to get off the road for any of the wintertime issues, and it certainly is it's a worthwhile call there, I think. But basically what you're doing is you're taxing me again to relocate my car someplace during this time when I take a vacation. Just seems like an extra tax.
You have to.
I'm already paying.
It's like hiring someone to stand in line for you. You can hire someone to move your car for less cost, John. I'm sort of kidding, but, you know.
It's accurate. I mean, that certainly is an answer to it, Rick.
you know, I'm not gonna argue with you, John, it is a tax, but it's the new Nantucket. Everything costs more now, and we don't have the ability, you know, we don't have a 500 car parking garage where we can just let people park. You know, I mean, think about where we've come from in 10 years to where we are now. You know, 10 years ago, or not even 10 years ago, I remember sitting at town meeting and spending almost 2 hours debating whether we should have a ban period, on parking structures. If we were to build a parking structure tomorrow, people would be elated because there's just no place to park.
The
You know,
traffic would be a lot worse.
Well, I don't know about
Yeah,
that.
That's not, we can debate that.
That's
We
a-
can
that's a
debate that,
different
but,
subject.
you know,
We'll save that.
I
there-
agree with you,
I mean,
but-
You are a minority now instead of the majority of what you were 20 years ago. The minority being that you're a year-round resident that lives downtown. There's not a lot of you left. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's what Nantucket's become.
Yeah.
It's a shame. I don't like it, but we have to deal with it accordingly. And we have, you know, we just voted last week to put a bike path in and take, I don't know how many parking spaces, I'm not gonna put a number on it, but it was at least 6
It's hard to say, Bobby, hard to say.
away. But again, these things are like gold, and we just took 7 away so we could have a new bike route.
Yeah. Well, okay, thanks for the dialogue back and forth. I do appreciate it very much, Bob, and the board. Another thought, though, that occurs to me is that we have created a whole lot of housing downtown, and we've waived parking requirements on every single one of them. But who gets to suffer? Who gets kicked out, basically? And it's the year-round resident, that minority that you're talking about that gets driven out of town because of some of this increased parking demand that has occurred. It's not, I consider it just to be very unfair to the residents who are trying to make a living here and actually do live here.
But,
No, I think that's a,
and I get where you're coming from, John, but what I'm saying, you're different. You live here year-round, you're here year-round, you live downtown. The majority of the cars we're talking about right now, they're there for months. These people are gone. They're not here, they're not year-round residents. They might call themselves year-round residents, but they're not.
I think
They own a house on Pine Street and they leave December 1st and they don't come back till April 1st.
It's
You
the
know.
car with the cover on it that the chief was
Exactly.
talking about. It's definitely there.
I think we're bleeding into the discussion a couple down from there.
Yeah.
I think we'll
I think
have you
I'll-
back up on
I
that
think
one,
I'll
I think.
back up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I came into this late, so I just want to ask, Chief, is it 21 days before the car needs to be moved? What is the limit, the daily?
No, the daily, it's 96
No,
hours.
I mean, on the street, is it not, it's 96 hours. If the
96
car doesn't
hours.
move in 96 hours, it has to be stored somewhere?
Well, if, you're supposed to move it every 96 hours, so if it's in this spot today, 96 hours from now, it should be in a different spot. There's nothing that says you can't move it around the neighborhood, you just can't be
Right.
parked in one
Yeah,
spot for 96
just one
hours.
spot, quality.
I think 50 feet or something like that.
Oh, is
but,
there?
yeah.
I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench into this discussion and ask a question. And this sort of ties to the end of the discussion, but on our residential parking people, is there a way that they can come in and get a pass that says, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks, I'm putting a sticker in my window, and my car's gonna be here?
So you get 2 weeks instead of 4 days or whatever the deal is.
Well, yeah, you know, people take a
Well,
week
just-
or
just to
two's
be clear
vacation.
about
Over
it.
2 weeks, I think you gotta deal with it. But if you're going on vacation for 2 weeks or less, you're going away, you're a resident now, you're on the resident street list, you live here, this is my house, you know. I'm not talking about just anyone can come in and get one. Have we just thought about that, or is it too complicated? I know it'll mess us up if there's a snow
I was
event.
gonna say,
Well,
then you're right back
I
where
think
you
the
were.
issue is, the question to me was, what's it take to park in this lot and to create a permit system? We didn't even really explore the other issue, although I could see where that would be a logistical nightmare for us.
Well, then maybe I take
to
it one
deal
step further and say, okay, if you're a resident and you're going away for 2 weeks or less, and you prove you're a resident, can we give them, you can park out here for 14 days and not have to pay the $10 a day?
You can, yeah, you can adjust that,
That sounds
however you want. But let
reasonable.
me just say something, though. Every time you add a condition like
It
that,
makes it more
you
difficult,
add
but-
10 more minutes of time it takes for the permit person to deal with it, because they've got to start sorting through all of the conditions and the what-ifs.
I'm just trying to get
about
to,
this.
to John's concern, that he's getting taxed because he lives downtown and he's a year-round resident, you know, and
You know, he's entitled to go on vacation just like anybody else.
John has an extended family. They all come, love to move his car anytime. I'm sort of kidding again, but, you know, that's the reality of that's another type of option, Bobby, so.
It's just one more thing you gotta deal with.
Yeah, I understand.
Well,
Well, part of the
enforcement-wise, like this time of year, like you were saying, there was no parking around the Congregational Church. The reality is, unless there's a complaint, are we really going out and enforcing?
Pretty much that's it. It's all complaint driven, but you
Right
will
now,
be
so-
shocked at how many complaints we get. You know, we get a call from a guy, you know, I can think of one that lives up on the top of Hussey Street, who called about a car that had been parked in front of his house for a month. And we went over and checked it out. It belonged to his neighbor. He didn't even know his neighbor's car, and this guy's lived there for a long time. You know, I mean, we get calls every day about cars that have been left, abandoned, somebody don't know who they belong to, et cetera.
So the reality is, unless there's a complaint, we're not really going out looking for this. And it's sort of,
Unless there's a snowstorm.
unless there's a snowstorm, but even then, they have to plow around it. I know a vehicle that's been parked in a 30-minute for, you know, I don't know how long, and we just plowed around it. You know, I shoveled around it when I did the sidewalk.
So we're gonna enforce the towing soon.
Well,
Well,
I'm not
Look,
saying that, but
you
I'm
know.
just saying it's
I mean,
not as
we
onerous.
only enforce that on the routes that were designated.
Right.
And during that last snowstorm, just so you know, we did tow 3 vehicles.
Yeah. So he knows the streets not to be on. He's on those other streets.
All right, Bobby?
Is there any other public comment on this part of our discussion, which is,
But it's
Two
sort of like, why not
fairgrounds,
try it
long-term
and see what
parking
happens, you know?
what's that?
Why not just try it and see what happens?
All right.
You know,
Well,
sort of-
I'm gonna close the public hearing section on this part. I'll keep the, just the 2FG. I'm gonna keep the other sections open. What is motions, comments, recommendations from the board?
Well, I mean, I think if we're gonna charge something, this is as reasonable as anything else, it's straightforward, and we try it and see what happens. So I'd move to accept the recommendation.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I'm gonna be the one opposed, just
Okay,
because
that's fine.
It's all
I
right.
just think we're taxing our locals.
It's $20 a day over in Hyannis right now, Bobby.
You know what? This isn't Hyannis.
I know. It's, our spots are even more valuable than theirs, and we're charging less.
Matt, I think the simple solution is to put meters in and call it a day, but
Yeah, well,
that's a whole nother battle. so.
I'm on that one. but
All right, next is
Courtesy van permit.
courtesy vans.
Next issue came up because the town has designated, I think, 4 spaces down on Federal Street as courtesy van only spaces, and there's been a increase in the number of people who are using those. You know, different hotels, different business establishments use a courtesy van to bring patrons from downtown out to their establishment and back, which we encourage because it keeps a lot of traffic down and less cars. And what we're wanting to do, to be able to, we don't have any control over a courtesy van. Somebody could get in an old beat-up pickup truck, call it a courtesy van, and say that's it. There's no regulations or anything that govern it. And so in order to bring a regulatory scheme to it, we had to adopt some we would have to adopt some regulations that would, A, create a specific courtesy van zone, which is there now, create a permit to use that zone, and as a condition of the permit, they'd have to meet certain requirements, like can't have beat-up cars, got to have, you know, four wheels on a vehicle, it's supposed to have 4 wheels on it, that kind of thing. And there'd be a fee established for it. And the fee that we just wrote in here as a suggestion was a $500 annual fee. They would get a sticker, they'd put it in their window, and any business that wanted one could get one, as long as their van met the criteria. As far as I know, every van that currently uses them would meet that criteria. There's nothing outrageous about it. And then that way we have a little bit more control over the use of that, those spaces.
Do they ever get stacked up now? Are there 26 vans trying to get into 4 spots? or
Well, it's
what?
not that bad.
Not that bad?
What happens
Can we
typically...
just live with it?
Yeah, the hotel vans try to use the ones in front of the visitor center.
Yeah.
The restaurant vans try to use the ones in front of Toyo and Federal and that that area.
So they sort of accept that, and they have their own way to deal with it. Yeah,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, it doesn't do them any good to be driving around. They
Yeah.
know the
Yeah.
times.
Kinda
And the
s-
typical times are when the boats are gonna be coming and
Where
and
do we
going.
come up with the $500 fee, Chief?
That was just grabbed right out of the air.
That seems,
So,
to me, a little excessive.
yeah.
Do, do like
For
250
something we're trying to
one, or-
promote.
Well, you know, here we are, we're trying to get people to use these and not come to town in their
Exactly.
cars. I think it's,
Almost better to do it for free.
I mean, I would be
You
comfortable.
need a little bit to process it.
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah,
I-
Well,
a couple hundred
just to
bucks.
give them a sticker so that they know, nobody else, it's like, kinda like the airport sticker, they can't pick up, they can't park, but I'd be more comfortable with
How about $100?
$100, I was gonna say. 500 just seems a lot of money.
Again, we see what happens.
One of the criteria is these people can't charge a fee for this service.
Right.
So, you know, this is just money out of their pocket.
No, exactly. So that's why I say $100 is a fair enough field. I mean,
We want to encourage.
some of the restaurants or some of the inns have private spaces, like down by Straight Wharf. But yeah, the more courtesy vans we have, the less congestion and parking issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only question I had, Chief, was vehicles must have all wheels covered with hubcaps?
If a vehicle would require hubcaps. In other words, what we did is we took the language out of the taxi and limousine regs because there was some concern by some, and I think it was justified, that some of the vehicles that had been seen down there being used were less than
Aren't these
slightly.
vehicles required by the state to have livery plates?
They're required to have at least commercial plates.
Commercial
So,
plates.
yeah. Most of them do have livery
So,
plates.
with the exception of the restaurants and the inns, how would this affect the tour buses or like Peter does his eco tour? Is he considered a?
It's
he
not
does.
related.
So
They,
it's
they
not
would be
related.
not
Okay.
related.
So this is just the free ride.
Right.
Okay. This is a public meeting.
Chief, is the fee gonna be per vehicle? Is it transferable? If they have 4 vehicles, can they just get one and keep?
No, it's
switching
per
them?
vehicle. It's a sticker that sticks to the window like,
Okay, I
like
didn't
the
know if it
cab.
was in there or not, because it's an issue we had with one of ours.
Yeah, good point.
So this would also cover like, well, no, I guess not, because if Cranberry Transportation was hired, they're getting paid hourly. They're
They're-
getting
they're not a
actually
courtesy
paid.
They're not a
Yeah,
courtesy
so
van.
yeah,
Got it.
that's a different animal, so. Any other public comment on this section on the livery van? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on the livery van section of this. Recommendations and motions from the board.
I'll make a motion to approve at $100.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, chief. That's all set with the $100 rate.
The next part wasn't anything that I had to deal with. Somebody wanted to have a discussion about residential parking permit rates.
And that's me, and I'll just cut to the chase. You know, we set the rates for $50 and then $250 accordingly, I think is what it was, per vehicle. And I would like to see this amended to treat this like you treat the steamship. And I think they use the street list. Is that how they use the street list? For second vehicles or third vehicles to just be a flat $50 per vehicle to people that live here year-round and are residents and not have to pay $250. I mean, how many of those stickers were there, Chief, do you know?
I don't remember the exact number, but there was a lot more than I thought there'd be. There was quite a handful of them.
Yeah, but how many of them do you think are actually year-round residents that this is their?
Well, that I couldn't tell you.
I'd like to change it for a year and see how many of them are actually year-round
So
residents.
this is for the second car?
This
I
is
mean, they still
second
pay-
or the
if they
third or
paid
the
the-
fourth.
But just to be
One
clear,
and
if they
two, they
pay
pay
$250, they pay $250 on the first car?
No,
I
they
wanna
pay
get
$50
the-
on the first, and then they
Is
pay
that-
$250 for each additional car.
I see, so we have an increasing fee structure.
Right, what I'd like to see is people that are truly year-round residents that are on the street list, like we get our exemption from the steamship, they would only have to pay $50 a car, and then I'd like, you know, in a year from now, we'll look at the numbers and see what the differences are. I think a lot of these people that are residents are not, that get permits for second and third vehicles in the downtown district are not truly year-round residents, but we're taxing our year-round residents.
So how would that work for the chief if they,
If the steamship can do it, we can figure it out.
Well, I mean, we can do it, but it'll definitely slow things down.
Well, then maybe we only sell those permits in January and February.
That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, I have no problem with that, and I don't think the residents would have a problem with that. Say, these, if you buy your permit January 1 to February 15th, and you show that you're on the street list and this is your residence, you get the $50, like we do with the beach permit. After a certain date, then you've got to
Okay.
pay the $250.
If I could suggest that possibly you continue this hearing, let me draft some language to come back with that we can look at.
Okay,
And that way we know what we're voting on,
okay.
or what you're voting on. And then, I think hearing what you're saying is a suggestion. I think we can figure out how to write that and make it during a time frame that would be, more advantageous for us.
Okay.
Okay.
and then so that we'd still have the increasing fee to discourage having 20 cars parked on the street?
Exactly. The
But
people
if-
that
yeah.
come here and,
20
spend
cars
3
by
months, they
non-residents.
bring
By not,
6
well,
cars.
in one house, yeah, you still want to have some, you want to discourage it somewhat.
Right. And at some
that makes
point,
sense.
Would you want to have a limit on that per household?
not for the first year, chief, I'd just like to see what happens.
get the
with it,
numbers.
And get the
Okay.
numbers. The other, and I'm just gonna throw this out there, and I'm not gonna bring this up tonight, or even this year, but I may wanna visit next year, is that I think that if you have off-street parking and you're buying parking permits, you should pay an exorbitant fee for them. If you've got off-street parking and you wanna buy another permit, that first permit should be more than $50. You've not only got your off-street parking, but in most cases, you've taken parking away from the other side of the street by putting in your off-street parking. So we shouldn't be giving people a deal for their second car at $50 because they bothered to put off-street parking. I'm not talking about this tonight, I'm just throwing this out there.
So
For
for,
future discussion.
yeah, and resident, non-resident gets in here too, or not, just so I.
Yeah, but you know what I'm
Because if we're
saying.
doing
is you-
something to
you've got
residents are
someone,
already at 50,
somebody
it's
puts in 1 or
academic.
2 off-street parking spaces, and they take away 2
understand.
parking
But-
spaces from the street, and then they go and they get another parking permit because they live in the core.
Yeah,
But
they
that
just-
could be a
they-
resident, just so we know.
Could be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but, you know,
And so you want to make, if they're exempt in effect, then you're still exempting them, or are you?
Well,
I'm
what-
getting ahead of myself.
this is a future discussion.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put it on your all radar that we're
Yeah.
gonna have this discussion probably next year about.
It makes sense, Bob, parking spots worth on, 30,000 on a private property, why are we giving away for 50
It seems like
bucks?
every time we put a curb cut in, we lose 2 spaces to gain 1, so, you know.
Yeah, and the other thing we have to this is sort of my take on it, is most places, if they have a residence sticker or a resident requirement, that's so that the residents have a place to park. And what's happened with us is our residents, if they move during the day, they can never get that space back. They can't get it back until 10 at night. If they leave their spot in front of their house, they don't get back in. And so some of this is demand management, which, you're sort of joking about having, parking kiosks or
I'm not joking.
paid parking. I think it's at the point where we need to do that. It's too valuable, and the idea of it isn't, I read the thing that came from planning that was in the census. The idea isn't to keep people from coming downtown. You do demand management, you do paid parking to encourage turnover, so there's more people coming downtown, and so there aren't people locking up the neighborhoods where our residents live. Right now, the residents I think that they're sort of second-class citizens to the workers who come and take the spots, starting at 3 or 4 in the afternoon all night. So the whole issue, we really need to tackle. We've had too much going on this year, but I think it should,
But until we give the
We need
the
to really deal
workers
with
a
it.
place to park, you can't just say you can't park here.
Yeah, but
We need to figure out a parking
Oh,
solution to downtown.
Understood, and you need a funding source to build a solution, and it's all part of the
And,
same thing.
you know,
We've done about a third of it. and
The
we've got
first step
2/3
was
left to
moving
deal
the
with.
tank farm. That's a big step towards a future solution.
That could be, but I'm just
Hopefully.
saying, I think people have to, I'm sort of just seeding it a little bit. People have to realize that, to sort of solve this, to get our sidewalks back, to get our parking back, we need to start really looking at it
so-
holistically.
We're gonna keep the public hearing open on this section, which is the review of the residential parking permits. Do we need a date certain? Do you wanna, when is our next meeting for, public hearings?
March 16th,
March 15th?
16th.
16th. can you have it together by then, chief? All right,
Make a motion to move it to keep it
open.
open until the 16th. March
Okay,
16th.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to make a comment tonight, since you're here, if you don't want to come back on the 16th? You're all good? Okay, thank you. All right, that takes care of the parking section and traffic rules for tonight. We'll move on to the last public hearing, which is a public hearing to consider the amendments to the Town Sewer District pursuant to Section 10 of the Town Sewer Act regarding Articles 19, 66, 67, and 68 of the 2016 Annual Town Meeting warrant. Who's presenting these?
Andrew?
Andrew?
What's that? Yeah, I think so.
Andrew, just so I can be clear here, Article 19 and Article, is it 66? Would, or
Article 9.
Yeah, so
1966 are part of the
the town,
plus Shimmohamic Pond? I mean, plus Monomoy Shimmo?
just 19. So
19.
19 is two maps showing the two areas. So 19 is the Nantucket Harbor, Shimmo, formerly known as Monomoy, and that's there. And then the plus, this is the balance of the plus parcels. So this is in the general vicinity of Meadowview Drive. It includes,
Can you go back to the first map for a minute? So this is where we're gonna extend the sewer district, even though we're sewing farther up?
you know, so the blue area is the extent of the existing sewer district now.
Right.
In Monomoy. And then the shaded in brownish area
Yeah.
is the limits of the extension.
And
So-
aren't we running the pipe farther up the road, though, as part of Shimmo Monomoy? Didn't the map that we had from Rosemary show it going all the way up to?
I'm not sure if it did or not, but those locations are tentative right now, right?
This is the area that was originally called Monomoy. You're thinking of the area that was originally called Shimmo,
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying,
which
is
is
that
north of this.
we're gonna run the pipe, but we're not extending the sewer district, so what good is?
This is the sewer district map that we are expanding to.
This is Nantucket Harbor Shimmo.
We've already voted on this, or we wanna vote on this?
We want to vote on it.
It's
But
Nantucket
the-
Harbor Shimmo,
But the
right?
map that you gave me for the Monomoy Shimmo, the pipe, and the,
Which showed the arrows on it and all that stuff?
yeah, it goes farther out, so why aren't we extending the sewer district all the way out?
This is the portion we're doing under Nantucket Harbor Shimmo. This is the extent of it.
When did we get the map? Can I pull it up?
Do I have?
There is another needs area northeast of this, but we're not doing that one.
That's
So the other needs area may have showed sewer extensions, but we're not doing it yet.
No.
I knew you had just looked at it.
On that map,
Goes all the way up to here.
pink is Shimmo.
Yeah.
It's a different
Nantucket
needs area.
Harbor,
It's a different article?
It's a,
Yes.
we're not
No,
doing that
we're not doing it
section.
this year.
Yeah, this is what we're doing now. Does it match? The question is, does it match this?
The pink area that on your map is not being done.
That's not on there.
That's the next phase.
Right, it's a future phase.
And I can see Bobby's confusion, because it shows that portion with all those pipes.
I gotta back up here. The articles that we have in town meeting, the $41 million,
Yes,
doesn't include this pink area?
does not.
And we plan to run pipe out there when?
That's one of the last areas, 20 years.
Yeah, that's not on there.
Maybe
So
that'll be.
everyone on this side of the road is now gonna have to put a Title V system in the pink area?
Correct.
Not a Title V. Under the new regulation, an IA system, when it's sold or fails, essentially, Bobby. And over time, the theory of the regulation over 20, 30 years, whatever, eventually there's enough turnover or failure that they all would be on IA systems. And if we are, you have another choice here. If people think we're really gonna sewer that before 20 years, like in 3 years, just to pick a number, Bobby, you can have, assuming it meets the criteria, an administrative consent order like we had in Mattocket, or whatever.
When I get given a map that says proposed sewer, and it shows this section, I was assuming this was Monomoy and this was Shimo. So now I'm completely going backwards as to what I've been explaining to people and what I understood to be the fact. So this is what,
This is why that's why we changed the names, trying to cut some of that confusion. We've talked about that a couple times.
we're still calling it Monomoy Shimo.
No,
No,
well,
we're not calling it
we're calling
Monomoy.
yeah.
Okay.
We're not, because it was sort of misnamed in the reports.
Okay. I get a map with proposed, it says big red lines, proposed sewer. It goes all the way out to here. I'm assuming that's what we're running, and now we're not running it. So
And another
for the
thing,
last 2 weeks, I've been telling people one thing and it's not been true.
Yeah,
Kind
it's-
of makes me look a little
well,
stupid.
not just you, it makes all of us. And, I find it helpful in my own mind, thinking about this, is the number of lots or parcels. So it looked to me like the article here had about 150 or something like, do you know
That
what?
neighborhood.
And the plus lots were about 100 or something. So forgetting where they are, Bobby, we're doing 150 lots, you know what I mean? I get, well, in total, but out here near the harbor, the others, in my mind, aren't related to the harbor, they're something else. And if you, for example, if you converted the plus lots, forgetting the interest, which drives all of this, unfortunately, you might flip that 100 lots out here, and then they'd be closer to the harbor, and you could do the ones Bobby's talking. I don't mean to throw a wrench in this, but that's just the kind of thoughts that go through my mind. But because we're doing plus lots in my mind solely because of interest, timing-wise, they may need it, but they don't need it, in my personal judgment, in the highest level of need, so.
And so the thought was we'd add the plus parcels in to meet the financing versus the pink,
Well, not versus, but just to meet it, period.
just to meet a period.
Yeah. So.
If,
But there was probably some financial reasons
I'm
for.
just giving you the alternative. If you're spending the capital, forget whether it's interest-free or not. So, whatever.
So, anyway, these maps have been around for quite a while. These were in the your September packet in draft form. So, they're finalized now. I don't know if there's any specific questions about them, but these maps represent the parcels outlined in Article 19.
And the type of pipes, so these are the low-pressure pipes and all that is the idea here and all that stuff, right? So,
Should we do them one at a time, or just, yeah? Do you wanna-
well, the question tonight, I gather what let me make sure I understand what we're doing tonight. Is this the night where the board is making a judgment, so at town meeting, it'll be 2/3 or 50%?
Correct.
Okay. So my own sense is, no matter how we resolve this question, Bobby, I think the board probably should move towards the 50%, and therefore we're recommending it.
Well,
But you gotta
let's
think
take
about
Article
that,
19 first,
you know.
because that's where we're at. And this is a public hearing, so is there anyone here that wants to make public comment? Mr. Kelly?
Jim Kelly, Chimma Pond Road. Quick question, is any of the infrastructure or the cost for the Brown area, are there any cost in there that would be borne on this project that may be used for the pink project, I'll call it, in the future?
The main line down Pulpus Road would be continued, Jim. That's it.
Maybe some back there, Bobby, but mostly what you're
would
saying
end
is
here.
right.
It would end,
Yeah,
just
okay.
on-
It would end at Gardner Road, the main line. And then
So they'd be
There would be
paying.
a spur off to the right that would pick up Moore's End Lane, and a spur that would go down Gardner, and eventually, if the other section were sewered, the main line would continue down Popus Road and spur off of that. So it would be hopefully sized large enough.
That was gonna be my question. Is it sized? It is. Okay, it's gonna be big enough. Okay. Well, should we do these one at a time? I move.
Yeah.
I move. that we-
Well, is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on Article 19. Comments from the board, motions,
Well, I made my comment, Bobby,
Yeah.
so.
motion?
Yeah, I motion we,
You want to make the motion?
yeah, I motion that we accept it.
Second, Rick?
Second.
What was, recommend.
Recommend,
Whatever we have to
recommend
do,
to
recommend
expand
it
this,
so that-
include this in the sewer.
Right.
Motion made and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Next one, Andrew?
66.
So Article 66 is an article, again, sponsored by the town, that both adds a few parcels in and removes some parcels out. So in general, the green parcels are the ones that are being added in. And basically, there's a property, one of the ones is here on Orange Street. Did the battery, oh, here we go. For some reason, that was accidentally taken out at last year's town meeting, so it's just being put in. Obviously, you can see that's in the middle of a sewer district, and it just was taken out by a mistake. The other one is here on Milk Street. This is Mariah Mitchell Observatory, which should really be included. And then this property here on, it's between Vestal Extension and Dukes Road. It really should have been included. It's essentially owned by one property owner.
Is that the Larrabee property?
Pardon me?
Is that the Larrabee property?
No, it's a property that's owned by a family by the name of Gilbertson. The main owner is in, there's an extensive issue regarding his situation in Florida. There is essentially part of the property in and part of the property is out, and you can see that it's sort of an isolated island there among what is already included in the sewer district. So in order to straighten these matters out, the idea is to put it all into one.
So there are 6 lots here, as I count them, right, coming in.
There's,
Forget what's going out. I mean,
well, there's, on paper, it would appear that there's 6 lots, but in reality, there's 4.
4
because they need to be merged together.
to be buildable or whatever.
If they're going to meet zoning, 4 would be the maximum.
And just to be clear on these, so, you know, this is sort of like Duke's Road in midget form. Who's gonna pay, do these have sewer in front of them, or is someone gonna run the sewer in front of them? And how are those sewer line extensions gonna be paid for?
The sewer is already in Dukes Road. So
So that lot is gonna hook off of the Duke's Road piece?
right, and all of these, again, it's one property.
Yeah, just to be clear.
Yep, so all of the sewer lines would likely go down and enter into Dukes Road
Okay, gotcha.
because of the height, the topography.
Why is the little piece off of Chatham Road being taken out?
Okay, so I just wanted to go over the additions. So let's go. The ones that are coming out are basically either owned by the land bank, owned by a conservation organization, which are all these little various ones through here, or it includes a portion of Evergreen Way here, which, from what we can tell, that was mistakenly put in the sewer district to begin with. There is no infrastructure for any of those lots, and actually the subdivision that was approved only extended sewer to a point here and to a point here. So none of these have any direct connection to a sewer line. And again, the topography here, they're large lots, they're similar, more similar to the Skyline Drive lots here.
And nobody's expressed any private interest in extending the lines?
Correct.
So are we getting asked by people to be put in or taken out, or is this completely from, are they requests that we're reacting to as a town? I guess what, my question is the town proposing these or individuals proposing, and we're?
These are staff generated
Okay.
through myself, through Kara's, and in consultation with Roberto as well.
Okay.
So, again, I think you
They're almost like fill-in where the sewer line's close enough or in front of them, or?
The add-ins are really corrections or oversights in my mind. The removals, we've been removing any that are not going to receive an assessment, because again, that helps add to the confusion. If land bank or conservation land is included, it frequently comes up, well, are they going to get an assessment or not? And of course they're not. The evergreen situation is, again, I believe it's an oversight. It really came out during the last year's discussion about rezoning of that particular area. And the fact is that, you know, it was pointed out that there is no sewer infrastructure there, which does raise why it was included. As you know, the original sewer district was drawn to properties that had sewer, not that didn't have it available. So.
This is a public hearing. Any comment from the public on these particular pieces in the article? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Comments, questions from the board?
My first reaction is, why not give a positive recommendation, Bobby, and just move them along?
Okay.
So,
Is that your motion,
that's
Rick?
my motion, yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, next one, Andrew.
Article 67 is a citizen article that was submitted by the owner of this particular property, which is on Milestone Crossing. I believe you've been provided with our checklist. So this is a property outside of the needs area that is subject to the checklist. It needs, I believe, nine points in order to meet the minimum qualifications for inclusion. Kara and Roberto and myself reviewed this. You can see the results are included. It did not meet the requirement of 9. It scored at 5. So we have given this a negative recommendation.
Can we go back to the map? Just want to see where it is again.
Yeah, I'd like to review a little bit about where this,
Right, so Hinsdale Road is here. The area shaded in blue is the existing sewer district.
and that lot on the left that is included already?
This,
From way back when, or what is that?
well, again, when the sewer district was drawn, if
Yeah,
you were in, you were in.
Okay, so he was in, is his sewer actually on the property? It's
Yes,
hooked up?
they had a hookup at that time.
Okay,
The zoning line essentially follows along here on Hinsdale, so the properties on this side are in the low-density LUG, limited use general 3 district, whereas here, as you cross over, you get into higher density of RC2, R5. So this is a larger lot here.
does Kara, or do you know offhand where that lot, the one that's on, and where the sewer line, where does he hook into?
I think there's one down
In Hinsdale.
Is there one on Hinsdale?
There is a-
What number article is this, Andrew?
67, yep. The sewer line, I believe, runs up Marion Drive and then takes a
Takes
turn
a-
and runs on Hinsdale.
And how far over Hinsdale, do you know offhand? I guess I'm partly asking because of the pork chop lots and all the discussion about those.
When you get up,
Andrew,
when you
could
get
they
a ways
come in?
up Hinsdale, it becomes it's not even a road.
Yeah, it may, Rick,
Yeah.
it maybe goes like 3 more lots down past the end of this
Yeah,
map,
well,
and
this
that's
is
where it
for,
ends.
maybe for another discussion, because it is there is an issue about how to deal with all those lots.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, well, is this a public hearing? Is anyone wants to make public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing. Motions, recommendations from the board. The fact that it didn't get 9 points to me is,
Yeah, I mean, you sort of follow the process. You know, it is a little, it's interesting in a way. In other words, from another perspective, Bobby, if we have lots of capacity and someone wants to pay to get in,
Well,
you know what I mean?
I can tell you, from my experience, I live one subdivision over in this,
Yeah.
and everyone who's gone to the ZBA for an extension in ground cover has gotten it, and if you run pipe into there, they're gonna get much more ground cover.
Right, no, I understand that, but.
I just
it's
think,
just
from my
interesting
personal
what's
point of view,
happening.
is if it doesn't meet the criteria, we shouldn't be just
Right, so
granting
we
them
can
in.
stop right there, I hear you, that's okay.
And we have
But-
to remember, we're setting a precedent. We make it easy, then what you're saying will happen.
No, I'm not,
Yeah.
but you understand.
Oh,
mean,
I
if
get it.
Sewer's
It'd be-
good, sewer's good, so you gotta figure that out.
Well, there's some
Anyway.
places where sewer isn't necessary.
These are
and it
big
isn't good.
lots.
So,
These are big lots, lots of ground cover, minimum footprints.
I'm certainly prepared to make the motion, so it
Yeah.
would be, we would,
support.
it'd have to have 2/3 at town meetings.
Okay. So that's your motion, is it seconded by Matt? All those in
Yeah.
favor?
All right.
So I guess it's a negative from us,
Yeah.
Andrew. Last one? Matt?
Bartlett Road. So this last article involves property at Bartlett Road. Again, the area shaded in blue is the existing sewer district. This area and the surrounding area was part of the Somerset needs area. Originally, this area was carried in the Somerset article. So when we initially discussed this article would have been included in the Somerset map if that, in fact, that broader area was adopted. Now, since the board has decided not to go forward with that, it's important that this area continue or is included in the district now. And the reason for that is that there is a subdivision of this property, which doesn't show here yet, but there is a subdivision, a new roadway that will be included here. Part of the conditions of this is that if sewer is available, that the applicant needs to connect his property to the sewer. It involves a paved road, it involves infrastructure that will be installed. We want this sort of done correctly from the start. So when the subdivision is built, it has the sewer lines in. And these are smaller lots and a mixture of commercial, so again, this area should be served by sewer. And as the subdivision is built, we want to ensure that the infrastructure is placed as part of the development here.
So, we want to extend this because there's a subdivision of a larger piece of property that we want to hook into the sewer. That's the long and the short of it, even though because we're not doing the Somerset. If the Somerset, this would be included in it.
The area is part of the needs area and it needs to be serviced by sewer anyway. And so if the applicant cannot put in sewer because they're outside the district, they'll instead install septic systems. So by not allowing them to connect in and build the sewer at their own cost, you're just adding to the group of people that will say, I just put my septic in, and now you put me in the sewer a year or so later.
I get that. My concern, and I'm just, well, yeah, this is gonna be Duke's Road all over again. You got one owner in the middle who's gonna profit from this, and you got 7 property owners on each side that now are gonna get a letter from the Board of Health saying you have to hook into the sewer.
The other property owners are essentially the same owner, except for there's one property here and these 2 properties here.
Those 3 right there is the same owner?
Correct.
What about Finback on the other side? Are they gonna be required to hook in? No, because we're not extending the
No.
sewer district across the street?
No, anyone who's not in the sewer district can't hook in,
Okay.
whether the sewer line is right in front of them or not.
So where is does the sewer line come out Bartlett now already, or where's it to? To right
It's
there?
right here.
I got you. So this guy is gonna extend the line to service this development.
If he wants to move forward in a
Timely way
very
before
timely way,
something else happens.
right, he will have to meet with Kara. He will have to design it in such a way that it will be complementary to the future extensions. and build it to her specifications now. And again, there's a cost here of doing that
And Kara, when,
will probably be more efficient than installing a bunch of septic systems that, again, are abandoned.
I understand.
Kara, when they design this pipe, is it gonna be designed large enough to take the Matticat and Somerset?
The section in Bartlett,
Yeah.
Would
So
have to
from
accommodate all the
that corner
flow.
to there, is it gonna be like a 12-inch main?
there, coming from Matticat, it's actually a force main, but the section from Somerset will have to be accommodated.
Coming from Matticat, it's a force main. So all of this is not gonna be picked up by the force main?
No, a lot of this will flow by gravity, so that we don't have to tie it into the force main.
When you say a lot of this, you're not talking about just this development, you're talking about the blue, the Somerset area.
Well,
I'm-
she's
I
talking
wanna
about
know what
Marble
the-
Way, Sweepy Hollow, Finback,
Well, I just
Somerset.
want to know what we're
yeah.
talking about, so when she
Yeah.
says.
The blue all has sewer in it.
It's already
The
sewer.
yellow.
Okay, so it's the yellow when it comes in. Gotcha. It reminds me a little bit of when the sewer district was extended along Hummock Pond Road. And a similar issue, Bobby, if that person developed or wanted to get sewer and, build houses and all that, he would have been required at his cost, as I understand it, to pay for the line from wherever it ends now, down to where he wanted to get to, in the appropriate size to take care of all
Right.
the flow from further down.
And just one more question, Andrew. If the sewer is extended is the ability to develop it more with sewer than with septic? Is there more potential for build out there with sewer than with septic under present zoning?
Well, the current zoning there is RC2.
Okay.
So it's the most, essentially one of the most dense and allowable areas for density. So, but there's public water available, so they're not constrained entirely by Title V requirements.
So Roberto, as far as, because there's water, there's no limitation on bedrooms or baths because they don't have to have separation between well and septic, correct?
Partially true. The soils and the groundwater level in this area are a little hard to work with. So we would have to take each property one by one. If there's no groundwater separation, they're either putting in an IA and they're mounting the system.
So chances are, they're allowed to have a lot more, they have a lot more flexibility with the pipe running than with the septic.
Yes. Yeah, that's anything that has to be done in this area. These are rough areas we've been noticing, and anything that'll be done in this area, you're looking at landscaping fees, putting in new systems, bringing in new sand, whole 9 yards.
Okay.
So this is an example of when people say, geez, there's really no benefit, this is an example of where there is a substantial benefit.
There's a benefit to developer,
To the
there's also a
developer.
benefit to the pond because it is close, but
Exactly.
I worry about,
I worry about the neighbors.
right, that, there are 3 people here now who are gonna get a letter. I don't wanna have this happen every time somebody runs a pipe. What happened on Duke's Road,
I do think it's important, the property owner here has, remember with RC2 zoning, there's a number of proposals here that could have been put forward. And this property owner worked very diligently with the planning board. This is Mr. Dimick, who has owned the property for many years, to make sure that the area in the back, for example, was residential, so it's residential abutting other residential. And many of those conditions are, this particular area is also part of zoning changes, which is moving this out of RC2 to R5 or
C-Tech.
C-Tech. So I do, I know you talk about developers and this, that, and the other thing.
No,
but-
no,
No,
I
and
get- I get you.
normal, but I think it's worth noting that it's a little bit different here, that we've gotten a lot of cooperation from this particular property owner. And I think there is a benefit, but there's two-way benefits, really.
This is a public hearing. Any comments from the public? Roberto?
Yes, one other thing on this area. The good news as far as the soil, the pipe going on this one is because it's just outside of one of the watersheds. they're not subject to the 6-month connection, they have the 2-year connection. So it's not the same situation as you see in Duke's Road where it's a nitrogen sensitive area. Here they would have the 2 years to connect.
Okay.
My only other question is a financial one, is there any difference in potential betterments to these properties, et cetera? Say we take this tonight and we accept it, and then we do Somerset and Mattocket, say in the fall, do we get more money, less money? How does it
We get no
impact?
money.
If he can get through the process, get the sewer design approved, do the construction and get everybody hooked up, he would not have the betterment applied to his properties.
So then that means we've lost how many properties that we'd counted in that?
15.
Yeah. So that's another consideration.
So just to.
I'm just
so-
asking, that's
Well,
why.
it's a good question. Sort of the flip side of that was, if he doesn't get it started,
Then
what
he would be.
happens?
But he's also, whatever the cost of that pipe is, we're not gonna have in the overall cost of the project, so it's almost a wash.
And if we end up building it, he would be subject to the betterments.
Right. He's paying for the pipe, he's not getting the betterment.
Yeah, it's-
We pay for the pipe, he gets the betterment.
Neither here nor there.
I'm just wondering, it's just interesting.
It's good to think about it.
Yeah, you wanna make sure that it's somewhat similar. You don't want this, like, you wouldn't wanna have this go and have it be,
It
comes out
also,
of the air, $20,000 a property, and then hand everybody else, all the neighbors across the street, $60,000 property bills in 2 years. You know, we would have that wouldn't be a fair situation. So I wanna just make sure and be assured that that isn't what we're doing.
it'd be one of the situations where the neighbors, it'd behoove the neighbors to hook into the pipe sooner than later, because once they're hooked in, they're not gonna get a betterment later.
Well, exactly, but then if there's an incentive, I'm hoping there is an incentive that, I'd like it to be a wash. If there's an incentive for that, then you could have some people pretty upset, and it could make some very important decisions and some very important sewering we need to do in the future more difficult.
Matt, do you want to take me through that again? I'm not sure
Well,
I quite understand it. So I'm-
If, I think is what Matt's trying to say is that if the private developer comes in here and he puts in sewer and it costs, $20,000, a lot to do.
Mhm.
And across the street, the town comes in and we put in our sewer and it costs $40,000 a lot.
Mhm.
What are the consequences of that
Right.
going to be?
So,
Well, I mean, couldn't that happen with any development, that the guy's putting in private sewer
There's a-
on,
well, we don't know what
on
it's gonna
Cliff
cost.
Road? There might
You
be a
know,
development for
it's-
20 units.
It's impossible for us to know. I mean, Donnie's gonna run the pipe down to the edge of this property so that he can get the development right. So he's gonna absorb a lion's share of the cost. House A and B, maybe it's $20,000 for them to hook into it, because there's no, they don't have to pay for the pipe. The pipe is being paid for by Donnie. So when Finback comes into it later on, they may have a $30,000 betterment. We don't know what the betterment's gonna be. So they may end up paying more, but
Yeah.
they're not in the district, so, it's kind of a flip a coin kind of deal,
I mean, the betterments, even if you had 100% betterments, they can't exceed cost. So the costs for
If,
this
you know,
guy are charged through the lot.
There's a lot of assumptions going on here. We assume that we're gonna have this article at fall town meeting. We assume it's gonna
Yeah,
get
no.
approved. We assume the finance is gonna be in place. I mean, I think at this point, this is the apple in front of us. We should deal with this apple.
Right, and I would have no problem in moving along.
Right.
Positive vote.
I
for-
think that, okay, so is that a motion, Rick?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Matt?
Yeah,
Aye. Okay, 4-0. All right, that takes care of the sewer part
I
of
mean, I
it.
think that, just back to that for a second.
Yeah, I
The
just-
the
I-
zoning is the zoning, the units are gonna be there one way or another. It doesn't really impact that.
understood, but let's say for argument's sake, say that it is, that, people in the know that do this every day, let's for argument's sake say that it's potentially half the price, and next year we get 30 articles, and we haven't got our act, or we have dueling articles. We could have 30 guys come in saying they want to add themselves in, so, because it's cheaper, and then
Yep,
and
absolutely.
then we're trying to pick up Mattocket and Somerset and make it affordable, and those people, we
That's
lose
the problem we have
customers.
to deal with.
We
I hear
lose
you.
customers and
Yep.
we lose income.
Well,
So
at least we got people paying the fee in the fund itself.
No,
So
I
there's,
understood, but
anyway.
that's,
But I hear
all
you.
I'm saying, I just want to,
That's why I raised Hummock Pond Road, same
Yeah.
issue,
Exactly, and,
so.
yeah.
All right, that takes care of the public hearing section tonight. We're gonna move on to town manager's report. We have the update from the independent housing consultant. Libby?
Thank you. Tucker is going to give the update. This is the housing proposal for 2 to 4 Fairgrounds Road.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. Grateful to have the opportunity to give you a brief update on the process regarding 4FG. I also want to thank Andrew Force and Leslie Snell for their input and guidance on this update. So just briefly going to run through a history on the parcel here, go through a summary of the interviews that I was privileged to conduct with each of you, and go over a sketch site and some concepts just in terms of general direction, and then a timeline and next steps, and welcome your questions. They don't have to wait to the end. Happy to address them as we go along. I think as you all know, the history of the parcel was that it was acquired in 2004 at an act of the town meeting, Article 77. I understand the original purpose was for municipal use, housing, and some discussion around a possible cultural center. At 2009, the initial affordable lots were authorized along Tacoma Way through Article 98. In 2009, the current police municipal building in which we're meeting were created. And then at last year's town meeting, you'll all recall, through Article 99, there was a unanimous reaffirmation of the use of portions of the property for affordable housing purposes. As you can see in the act, definite discussion around town and county employees and consideration perhaps first in that area, but generally for the purpose of affordable housing. And we are using the term and workforce housing. So again, I thank each of you for spending some time with me to share your thoughts on the development of the property. This is what I heard as the common threads amongst you. There was universal agreement that we'd like to see workforce slash affordable housing developed at the site. There was universal reaffirmation that a town employee preference may be appropriate in what is developed here. And I believe that the intention was not so much that an employee would come into a unit and be there indefinitely. It was, as I heard it, more the intention that it was a landing spot for town employees, and that maybe there was a 3 to 5 year horizon sort of thing, but to allow them to maybe find a more permanent housing solution. There was a strong desire to retain the underlying ownership of the land and utilize a long-term ground lease. There was a desire for a mix of units, some single-family residences, perhaps a separate basement apartment under a number of those. Some discussion around maybe some units being allocated toward town department head use, and apartment style building or buildings being a part of what goes there. There's strong demand for 1 and 2 bedroom, and as well it was emphasized the need for housing some of the seasonal employees of the town. And again, I understand there are roughly 130 seasonal employees, about half of which today we're able to house. So that is a high priority. And I noted here that there has been some interest from other organizations on the island with similar seasonal needs that maybe financially would like to play a part in helping make some of this happen. Other commonalities, I think there was universal agreement that any larger buildings would make sense to be located in closer proximity to the police fire, this municipal building, to kind of keep the massing together. I think there was I would say there seemed to make some sense that the dormitory seasonal employee style housing, maybe having that in some proximity to the police building was not necessarily a bad thing, given the nature of the younger population of some of the seasonal employees. And generally there was a desire to, again, taper from the larger buildings to buildings that more reflected the neighborhood as they got closer to the Tacoma and Amelia Drive areas. Some general comments that were made simply was that, you know, it needs to be done right. This is something that's going to be looked at by the community, and we only get one shot at this, so we do want to do it in the right way. Concern over, obviously, appropriate parking, some green space, keeping it livable, and obviously there's a balance that goes on with trying to maximize the asset we have to work with, but again, wanting to make it an inviting place in which to live. Ongoing maintenance repairs, a key consideration of any proposal we might be looking at to ensure that it is not only done well at the beginning, but stays that way over time. And I think there was a general desire to work under the proposed CN zoning article that is part of this 2016 town meeting warrant, and that would be preferable to going the 40B route, which would be the alternative if we, you know, said we want to get going tomorrow morning in writing the RFP. Some individual considerations that I heard from members of the board that I just thought to include here. I'm not sure that there's universal support for these, but I did want to make mention of them as they came up in our conversations. Some single-family units perhaps being made available for sale, that obviously would fly against the idea that we want to retain ownership of the underlying land. The idea of a small commercial element to this was brought up by one board member. Tiny houses as a concept, energy efficiency, you know, these may be things that we in our RFP want folks to take into consideration, or in terms of creative thinking. I don't know that we want to dictate specifically a tiny house requirement, but those were things that did come up through the course of the conversations, and again, I wanted to make note of them. This is just a very general site sketch to give you an orientation on where we're talking about, and sort of this initial proposal for housing at the site. So as you can see, this is Tacoma Way here. Here's Amelia Drive. And these are the lots that were created that I mentioned at the beginning. And, you know, we're really focused principally on this area here at the beginning of development on the Four Fairgrounds site. There obviously is additional land over here, but as you all know, there are a number of thoughts going into what might happen over on this parcel, and we think it'd be premature to do things in this area until what is happening over here is further defined. But there would need to be at least the beginning of a roadway that may end up continuing on at a future date. You'll see right here, these are just intended, you know, not necessarily to scale or anything like that, but just generally the notion that you know, a couple, call it larger scale dormitory buildings may be located in this area. We've put them here to preserve, again, the ability to do some additional housing work in the future over here. And again, the idea that some not sure of the right word, oversight, just our proximity to our police department may be a good thing with respect to keeping things under control here. And over here, you'll see, again, it's a single building here. Maybe it ends up being 2 buildings, 3 buildings, but the idea that the larger apartment building would be located further away from Tacoma and in as close proximity to the municipal lot as possible. To just give you a little flavor of the types of things we're seeing as the perimeter housing development, these are examples that we had taken a look at. The idea being that just because we're trying to be efficient with space and maybe do things on a smaller, not necessarily tiny, but a smaller scale, that we can maybe get a lot for our buck and have it attractively done, again, fitting in with the surrounding area. So the general timeline here is, again, grateful for the opportunity to give this presentation tonight and receive further feedback from you all. Make sure that we're moving in the right direction. Coming up very shortly, a canvass of the department heads to assess individual department needs, really drill down on specifically in terms of thinking about town needs, what they are and what they may be a little bit down the road. We are planning at the same time to do a survey of the nonprofit community, as well as the chamber has stepped forward and said they would like to be a part of the housing discussion. Leave it at that. And in February and March, the idea would be to review and research comparable town housing RFPs. Falmouth is an example that has come forward and Libby and I have discussed, as well as review the town of RFP process with Heidi Bauer. Obviously, in whatever we are going to do, we want to maximize the SHI credit so that we can get closer to that 10% mandated by the state. And then really March, April, we see as a time frame for drafting the RFP. In so doing, perhaps having some conversations with interested parties who already have stepped forward. You all will recall last summer, Matt McEachran and his firm had put together just some concept things. There were 2 firms that actually came forward and put together estimates on those concepts, knowing that that was just an exercise and that whatever that original concept wasn't going to be built, but they took the time and had the interest to put something together initially. And so we want to circle back with them and perhaps others in how we're developing things. As you all know, town meeting is April 2nd, going back to the CN zoning article and hopeful passage of that there. I've just included April 27th as another update point like this. Obviously a little meatier at that stage in terms of where things would be. Take some feedback there, refine, and we're working with a June 1st target date to issue the RFP with the idea that we might receive bids back around the middle of September. So that is what we have discussed, and I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can. Thank you.
Questions from the board?
Well, just with that kind of a target, when do you you're sort of jumping ahead, when would you expect we'd occupy?
Year, 18 months.
From September?
From the,
I'm just trying to get a sense for what
hey,
that
you'd have to
means.
permit and build. 18 months would be a realistic number.
Mm-hmm.
Tucker, just curious about the RFP. I think when you're further along in that process, it just might be nice, I'm sure you're going to check back in with us, but
Yep.
I'm just curious how that, I think that's, a lot of the details are going to come out there, and I think what you were saying about having it being broad is really important. We want to bring in some creative thought into this process. And
Mm-hmm.
the lot is pretty nice. There's a lot of flexibility for what we could do, and I think there's gonna be some expertise that's gonna come in that'll help it along, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps the April 27th date should be moved up, and we could get back together and formally review things at that point.
Yeah.
Do you have some sort of rough ideas of how you see this getting structured? I mean, is the basic idea one way or another that the land goes in free and that the rent on the units pays for the construction and development cost of them, roughly? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense for how we're, you know, so somebody's got an idea about how that's gonna proceed.
Well, no developer's gonna build this unless he's making money on it.
Well, I'm just trying, or is it, but if it's a nonprofit, Bobby, it may, which it might well be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, Mr. Atherton, and I would say that there are several different ways in terms of ideas that, you know, we've kicked around, but I think, again, part of going to some of the experts and potentially interested parties in the field, you know, we could come back with maybe a more specific, this is what it's likely to look like, but I think there's several different ways it could happen.
Yeah, that would be something I'd wanna understand to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, early on, I think, because you can get down the
You
road.
don't wanna
and
get too down the path and find out it's,
some guy says, you know, we're only gonna pay, the town's gonna pay for 90% of the cost of the buildings, you know, I mean, we don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, the definite idea is zero to minimal, you know, town financial obligation.
Well, it's just what I was trying to get at in the broad strokes.
Yep.
there.
Yes and no. I mean, if we're gonna build dormitory housing for town employees, we should
We should
probably
pay for
absorb the lion's share of the cost of that.
Right,
And that
but-
could be
but-
part of the agreement, is like, well, okay, we'll pay for these buildings, and you get these buildings, and then you collect the rents on those. So-
Makes the numbers work a
I mean,
little
it's-
easier.
Yeah, and the mix, but the overall concept, I mean, we may end up, you know, with town employees subsidizing in effect the rent. I'm not quite sure how that's gonna work out, Bobby, but overall, maybe you should segregate those out if that's what you wanna do. But I guess what you're saying is you're better off to wait.
I think you
to
gotta
hear
get a
from
little more
people.
farther in the process
Yeah.
before we, but, yeah.
Yeah.
Erica, can you go to the site map real quick? Just sorta. Back to, yeah. So I'm looking, I understand those are the bigger buildings.
Yep.
My own opinion is that isn't kinda close enough, and they don't look like liner buildings. I could see them lining up on the right side. I mean, my thought when I look at it, I look at the whole property.
Mhm.
I don't look at just this section of the property.
Mhm.
So whatever we have to do here should be set up to be complementary to the rest of the property when it's developed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't sense that yet. You know, I understand you and I have talked about it,
Mm-hmm.
but so that's one comment. And I guess a question, you've got like sort of lots, 1, 2, 3, 4. Are those others roads on the left?
You're speaking right in here, Matt? Or-
Yeah, is that a road? Is that a
Yeah,
road?
this is intended to be an internal road so that actually, you know, these lots would be accessed off the back versus off of Tacoma.
Yeah.
And then, you know, these lots obviously would be serviced by these, you know, small roads.
And I would guess that somebody, that we may get, someone that's done this, like some of the things I've sent you, might design it slightly differently.
Yeah,
and that-
absolutely.
and I
Yeah.
think- yeah.
I mean, this was not put together by Blackwell. You know, we're
Yeah.
just trying to make sure that we're moving in a direction that you all feel is appropriate.
Just, one other thought, if, depending on what happens with, I know this idea of like kind of phasing the structures over Tacoma, so it's kind of get that sense it's Tacoma's like a neighborhood, and you have houses, phasing it. I personally feel like if it was useful in making kind of the numbers work to maybe sell some of those lots, if they had like covenant, affordability restrictions on them in some capacity, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, just in the sense that it could be a tool in trying to understand. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but I think you know, that could be used, you know, you sell some of them and that helps pay for other aspects of the project, but you still keep them affordable in perpetuity. If they're already gonna be kind of, you know, single-family homes, to me, it kind of makes little sense, but I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I don't wanna tie our hands.
And can we go back to the pictures that he had, the show that he had there? This, yeah, that's one I showed Bobby earlier.
Yep.
The one on the big picture on the bottom, they have 15 units and 25 parking spaces in about 0.8 of an acre,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think people have to realize that, you know, even our downtown is dense like that.
Yeah.
So a couple of those buildings, they all look like they're, some of them are single units, but some are like the one on the top in the middle. That's like 3 units, you know, one building, but they made it look like 3 units.
Yep.
So there's a way to put the density in, and that'd be a place that you'd want to live.
Yeah.
You know, like you've got a nice green space in the middle, the parking separate from it. There's a way to do this, which when we say we want to do it right, it's really important to do it right, not to piecemeal it and have one thing look like something and one thing looks like something else.
No.
We want it to be consistent.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think your comments about the density too, Matt, you know, we want it to be nice, but also, you know, the density, it's right next to Amelia Drive, which has, you know, it makes sense.
Well, and this is more dense than that, but it would be a place that you'd be proud and want to live in.
Yeah, you want
And,
it.
and if you're renting, it'd be a great place
You
to
can walk
rent.
around, you can get
park,
most
and,
everything.
think about it, you're not, you know, you've got the front of here, you put a couple fences up, there's a safe place for the kids to play, there's a safe place, you're not dealing with, with the cars blowing by. I mean, there's a lot of positives that we can do as long as we don't get stuck on the traditional suburban unit, you
Yep.
know? So.
Good. Sounds like you're moving along well, Tucker. Keep it up.
Any other questions? Libby, you all set?
Thank you.
Tucker.
All right, thanks.
All right, we're gonna move on to Selectmen's reports and comments. We have an appointment to the Mosquito Control Committee. We have 1 vacancy and we have 1 applicant, which is Tim Lepre.
Move
Make a
approval.
motion. Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Thank you. We have a request for an approval of a conflict of interest.
Richard
Richard Hussey, we're gonna be seeing more and more of these. This is the same thing as last week. I would,
Make a motion to approve, accept.
all the second, all those in
Could I
favor?
just, before we vote, I'm just reading what he wrote. He said, I may not participate, I guess. I guess that's his choice, is what he's saying.
I request
I requested determination about how I should proceed. It almost seems like a question is being asked.
He can proceed.
This
to-
is,
If he's asking whether he has the ability to proceed, he does. I mean, if we eliminate everyone who's gonna be in the sewer district, we're not
Oh,
gonna have anyone.
It's-
I'm not there yet. I'm just asking.
it's
what-
wording that town council provided that is typical wording that it would be used in a disclosure like this. It was used in mine and it was used in the other individuals. So what he's saying is his duties require him to participate. He may not, meaning really he cannot, because of a financial interest that he's disclosing. He's requesting a determination about how he should proceed. Meaning, are you going to let him proceed and find that his interest is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of his services, or is it? The other two, you said the finding was that it was.
I would just observe that I don't know how to get around these, and Bobby, sort of like what you said, if you start one, what do you do, and so forth. But yet, it's not, let's be honest about this. You can watch people, I haven't been to a capital program, so I'm not talking about it here, and how they manage the process in their own dealing with a cost issue. And it's a tough road for these folks.
It's a very tough road.
And I think we all need to recognize that no matter where you are in this process, people are going to make assumptions about how you're proceeding and whether you're too close to one side or the other, because they're all
The same
kinds of
could be
issues.
said for this board.
I agree, Bobby.
When we're
Yeah.
talking about increasing the tax base with these
Bobby,
expenditures,
I'm
with
just-
the breakdown from residential to commercial. So, you know.
Bobby, I
mean,
agree.
I
I'm
think
just
in this
making the
small
point. I'm
town,
just
it's
trying to say the obvious.
No,
So,
I get it, Rick, and
you
it's
know,
good for it to be on the
and
record.
we all need to know what we're trying to deal with here. So I don't, and I just, in the last time, I do encourage, and I don't know if it was required last time in the motion, that these all be posted on the town's website through the clerk's office where all the disclosures are.
Right.
Okay?
I think we said that
I
last time.
think, let's just make that clear. Thank you.
So the motion been made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Anything else under Selectmen's comments before we go to committee reports? Rick?
Well, maybe this is, this is sort of, I wanted to go back, if, just for a second, if you don't mind, to Matt's comment about the property we talked about coming into the sewer district. Sort of afterwards, I started to think a little bit, and is Andrew still here?
No, they just.
So, I think we do need to think a little bit more about this, and not so much in terms of that property, but I could see somebody on a street. I'm thinking of, if you go up Popus Road, and someone says, gee, I'd like to, I'm one road beyond the end of the current project, and there are 3 houses coming off a dead-end road, and we're all gonna build alternative systems. And you know, it's gonna be less expensive for us to extend the sewer line 500 feet, or 300, or 100 feet, turn right, and we're gonna sewer those 3 lots. And, you know, it's gonna cost us $10,000, I'm exaggerating to make the point, a lot, and it's a lot less expensive than putting in the alternative system and/or the betterments you're gonna charge me when I get there. So, Matt had a point that I'm sort of rethinking, not so much what we did, but we need to think about a policy. I wouldn't be, anybody can figure this stuff out. and-
Don't forget, though, if we don't approve it, it has to get 2/3 at town meeting,
Right,
and then,
and they'd have to get on the warrant next year and all that,
Right.
but it's an issue, I just wanna think
Right.
through how to deal with it, okay?
And it,
So we're not ignoring a possible problem here.
Yeah,
Or
go ahead.
Maybe you've already done that, but
I just was gonna say, we've talked a little bit about this with respect to the Duke's Road situation.
yeah,
So, just as a little example, just talking out loud through it a little, your Pulpus example, if those are people that are in a needs area that is to be sewered in the future,
mhm.
at some point, it's meant to be sewered. So if they want to jump the gun a little or get in on it earlier by installing their own line, it isn't going to cost them $10,000 each. It's going to cost them
Well,
$1 million something, and they're going to divide it up among themselves, or one developer is going to do it and fund it. The rest of the people, first of all, it would have to get into the district. Secondly, it would have to, the town would have to spec it out, and it'd have
Right,
to.
all those things, I understand,
Right.
but I'm not sure it's as expensive as we think, who knows? I just want to make the point. I mean,
well, don't forget, we haven't set what the percentages on the abatement are yet, so, and we have a meeting with the FinCom, and
No, I understand.
And we have
Bobby,
we have a lot of work
I'm
to
just
do
raising
before we
that
hit
issue.
that meeting.
And-
we might
and-
find that it's cheaper to be in the abatement than it is to be on the other end of it.
Right, so another, just a little bit of a question. Going back to the Board of Health discussion about Duke's Road for a minute. When I read a lot of those incoming emails, there were a number of issues. And some of them, the Board of Health, I guess, could delay required hookups, but that's a time issue. And I think some of the reasons they have concerns are not just time issues. So that I just want to be clear, have a brief discussion with the board about that. So if my concern as a lot owner was that you're going to make me pay for the this and the that and it adds up to whatever, that's a cost issue that I'm going to have to incur whether I hook up in 6 months or 12 months or 2 years or 4 years. And that cost consideration, I don't think should be part of the Board of Health issue. It's either healthy to have people hook up or it's not. You know what I mean? It's not always black and white. Timing is something, and if you delay it another 12 months, they don't have to come out of pocket right away. But the health issue, seems to me is gonna be probably clear.
Well, and the
You know what you know where I'm going here, Bobby?
I do, but the disadvantage of these people on Dukes Road versus the people on, say, Plus, for example, is they're gonna get charged a betterment. They're gonna be able to defer that over 20 years.
Right.
The people on Dukes Road are gonna have to come up with $25,000 or
Or
$30,000
get a second
next
mortgage
week.
or whatever.
Exactly.
Well, no,
There's no financing
Whoa,
by the
whoa,
town
whoa,
or
whoa,
whatever.
whoa. Why are they coming up with $25,000 or $30,000?
Because by the time they hook into this pipe, and a lot of them have to put in pump stations because they're below the grade, and then they remove their old system and fix their landscape, and it's gonna be $20,000. Not to mention the hookup fee and the privilege fee, which is
Okay,
another
but-
$8,500.
But they're also not paying a betterment, which they would if
No,
the
I'm not
town,
arguing that. I'm saying on a betterment, they can finance it out over 20 years.
they can finance the privilege fee.
Right. Well, they can finance the betterment.
Yeah, and the privilege fee that they're gonna,
The privilege
Hey.
fee can be paid over time also.
Right.
Bobby.
Right, but they're gonna have to go and
There's some
either
other
take a
things that
second
they-
mortgage on their house or whatever.
Right,
So,
right, okay.
is what I'm
Anyway, I
saying.
just wanted to raise that because I think my responsibility as a member of the Board of Health and representing this board there is not the cost consideration.
Yeah.
And
You know what I mean?
And
So I wanna-
I'll say what I always say when they bring the zoning articles and they pretend that the cost and how it's gonna be paid and everything doesn't matter. I think the cost should be part of the consideration that the Board of Health is. Just, it should be part of the thought process,
Well-
because if we're forcing, like, what the first letter we received was a one-bedroom, one-bath house, saying exactly that they couldn't afford it, and another letter received was they were X and they wanted more, but there wasn't enough room, and this might all not be true, but their engineer's telling them they can't add on to their house because there's not enough capacity in that pipe. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. That's the second letter we received.
Right, so
So there's a lot of different weird issues.
I understand, but just to be clear, again, I don't think the Board of Health is involved with setting the capacity of the pipe. The DPW and the Board of Selectmen are responsible for that. So, look, we don't have to continue this, but I think you get my drift. There are different issues, and it's not all just exported from here to there. Some of those things are gonna come back.
I think some of the concern from the neighbors on Dukes Road, and I would be one of them, is that I have a perfectly functioning system, and now all of a sudden I have to abandon the next 6 months. And something that the Board of Health could do, that's perfectly within your power, is to say, well, we'll give you 2 years or 5 years, or we'll inspect your system each year, and when it finally fails, you can hook in. You don't, I mean, it's not like there's this cost for this pipe is out of the town's pocket, that we're trying to recoup this cost to run this pipe down the road. The private developer did that.
Right, but there are nuances here, Bob.
we
I
also
hear
might
you,
wanna
so.
understand more from the health department about the status of the septic systems along that road, because my understanding from discussions with the health director is that by and large, they are failing, and they are going to have to be replaced with potentially
But that's what
IA
I'm
systems.
saying,
Which
is
encourages hookups.
the
then.
Board of Health
Right.
could
Yeah.
say that we're gonna inspect your system every year, and when it fails, then you have to hook into the pipe.
Right. We could almost do like, that's almost like the regulation in the Harbor Watershed District in a way, Bobby.
Yeah.
And you just have to make sure that, I'm just trying to think ahead, that's a possibility
You know,
perhaps, okay.
For these homeowners on that road, at that point, when the system is compromised, the cost is gonna be the same whether they put a new system in or they hook into the pipe. I think their problem, from what it's been expressed to me, is all of a sudden they get a letter saying, you have to abandon a working system and hook into our pipe now. And
Right.
their big concern is that the town didn't run this pipe, a private developer did. This is as much on them as it is on us, because they weren't paying attention at town meeting when these articles came
Right,
up.
right.
And I think a lot of people didn't understand that when the pipe runs by your house and the sewer district's extended past you, that all of a sudden now you have to, you're mandated to hook in. The word is out now on
But
that.
that's a fairly recent,
That's a recent change.
fairly
That's
recent change,
this
because I
year.
think the letter that went out from the engineer was saying, I think was working off the old rules,
Hook
where
in
you
if you
maybe
want.
didn't have to. So I think
Okay,
that that's
anyway, I
been a
just
change.
wanted to raise, there are a lot of stuff floating.
Well, we,
Yeah.
I know, going back to that though, is, it's, at one point we talked, you only had to hook up if it was a town pipe. And then at some point it changed that any pipe.
No, if the sewer district's extended,
The
You have
sewer
to
to-
look at it if you're in the district, which
Right.
it was extended down Duke's Road, but
But it also now is a town pipe, because it's been accepted by the town.
Okay, that was another thought.
But ultimately, I guess what I'm getting at is we didn't run the pipe. We didn't decide we wanted to run the pipe down the road. If that developer hadn't wanted to develop that property at the end of the road, chances are there'd be no pipe down Duke's Road right now.
Well, not right now, but in the
Eventually.
future, because it's in a needs area.
Okay, all right, thanks for the discussion.
And,
My, yeah.
sorry, Matt, Rick, I just wanted to kind of follow up. One more thought I had was, when you talk about extending pulpus, if we get out to Shakimo or Shimo, and then, someone says, okay, I want to extend it down further, is that, maybe that's a good thing?
I understand, and my.
I don't know,
It would be interesting to get, I don't know what the costs are, so we're gonna ask somebody just to find out what people think the cost of that is, so we have a feeling for what's possible.
Well, it'd be a great thing, Toby, if the furthest guy away did, and he built the whole system for us, it'd be great. But if all the low-hanging fruit is picked off, and then we are stuck bettering, the furthest away properties, then the numbers might not work, they wouldn't work out.
Yeah, no, I'm just.
So that, it's kind of, you have to, it depends how it's sequenced.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm just.
And whether or not they're in a needs area.
Exactly. Well, assuming these are all of these guys all are.
Yeah, those are, I
Yeah.
thought you were saying beyond.
Oh, I was saying that area.
Okay.
I have one thing under Selectmen's comments I wanted to talk about. We had, we were all served papers on the, what was it, 13 C Street, on that HDC decision. And I'm not sure what the protocol is, or how we should act on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Well,
yeah,
I want to make something clear, because I recuse from this as well as Don. We are a board of 5. There were 2 recusals, 1 to uphold the HDC and 2 to overturn the HDC. And it was pretty clear for me from what I listened to at council, saying that it takes the majority of the board of 5 to overturn the HDC. So even though the sitting 3 members voted to overturn the HDC, in my mind, there wasn't sufficient vote to do that. So I don't know if this lawsuit even needs to go forward if a letter from this board says that this was the vote.
Well, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Bobby, I agree. I
we don't
said that
disagree.
right after the meeting.
Yeah.
And to people right then and there at the time, I said, this is easily solved, do less than so. And what I'm, and this idea it's going to town council, that's fine, but I think it's, to me, because let's talk about it, because we don't know how people are gonna vote.
Right.
I mean, he might have voted the other way.
Right.
Okay, so you take the vote is the vote, the resolution is the resolution. Then it seems to me the next step could have been, or still can be, that town council writes a letter and says, because of this section of the charter for whatever, you have to have 3 members or a majority. And therefore, you ought to pass the following resolution. And he writes it, and he says, here, Mr. Chairman, would you introduce this resolution at a board meeting? It says, because of this, you did your vote, that's fine, but the vote is nullified because of what's in the jigger.
Because of 2 recusals, 1
But the vote-
against.
But I think that what we did was, in my mind at least, proper, because you don't know how the vote's gonna turn out. So, Anyway.
But the follow-up, I mean, we've got to, we've been served papers, and there's potential the town's spending money, and there's, and legal fees and triple damages and everything else. So I would say, let's do what we have to do to get this to go
well,
away.
I just gave you one example. There are probably
yeah.
5 other ways, and I gotta say I'm quite, I think that should have happened right away in my mind.
So I think, Matt,
So-
what needs to happen is, since you were the sitting chair, is you need to work with Libby to have council write a letter that's saying, even though the vote, that this was the vote, which was 2 recusals, 2 to overturn the HCC, 1 to uphold the HCC, and that we didn't have the majority of 3, so therefore the HCC decision is upheld.
Yeah, whatever he has to say, however you say that.
Yeah, so,
And that would, hopefully then the lawsuit will go away and we won't run up
there we go.
thousands
Okay.
of dollars in legal
Yeah,
fees for
that's-
something
that's-
that understood basic, I think everyone understood that, even though,
Yeah.
No. So.
Well, we're, I think the end of the day, we're, my thought is, we're an appellant body, and you kind of call balls and strikes, and,
Yeah.
what are you supposed to do?
Do we have any committee reports? No. I don't think so. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So, next week is school vacation, we are meeting.
Rick, you're not sure if you're here or not, so we may be a
I'll
board of three.
check my count, I'll let you know. I'm gonna be gone one Wednesday shortly, but I'm not sure which
Libby, are
one.
you here next, who's here next week?
Greg will be here.
Greg will be here, and Erica, you're gone? You're here? Great, all right. Have a nice vacation.
Libby, do you have one of these at the?
This is not directed at Carol, this is directed at Rosemary. When I asked for a map of where the pipe's gonna go, don't give me a map that shows all this, because I just spent the last 2 weeks telling people this is where the pipe's going.
Okay, but just so you understand, she probably thought you realized